flag is flying at half-staff high above Fenway Park, but tonight is not for grieving or for mourning. It is celebrating the greatest hitter who ever lived. It's a celebration of an American hero, Ted Williams, number 9 tonight at Fenway Park. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Nesson Studios. I'm Bob Rogers alongside Jim Corsi. Delighted to be with you. As a matter of fact, we will be with you commercial-free, start to finish tonight. No commercials on Nesson as we bring you all of the festivities at Fenway Park. And Jimmy, we're very lucky, both of us growing up in New England, some great sports heroes. Think about Bobby Orr and Larry Bird, but I think Ted Williams rises above all. Now, we're both too young to really remember him playing, but he's had an impact on both of us. Yeah,
we're really young. It was more of our father's generation, but I was introduced to it at a young age. We had The Science of Hitting, the book in our house, and my dad used to take us down the basement. We were 9, 10, 11 years old, and swinging the bat in all directions, and we used to hold the bat like he did. We used to cock our hips the way he did. He said, hey, you got to cock your hip when you hit, and you got to keep your weight back. And so we had it in our house even though we were young.
Nobody knew as much about hitting as Ted Williams, and he liked to tell everybody that as well. I was very fortunate as a kid to go to Ted Williams camp in Lakeville. Now, I never had a chance to get a hitting lesson from Ted Williams. One of my assistant coaches in baseball, John Rice, he actually, when he was 12 years old, was at camp, and Ted Williams brought him up in front of everybody and diagnosed his swing and helped him out. But everybody always wanted to hear Ted Williams talk about hitting. And then years later, when I was able to tell Ted Williams that I went to his camp, he said, well, what did you learn? What, and he wants to talk about the way you hit as a 12-year-old. He just loved to talk about hitting.
He did. My brother went to Ted Williams camp. I actually went to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, to Little League camp, but my brother ended up going to Ted Williams camp, and my brother was a pretty good hitter, but Ted would just go on forever and ever talking about hitting. You ask him that one question, open the door to talk about hitting, and he can go on for 5 minutes without being quiet.
Another guy who can go on for a long time without being quiet, it's Tom Caron. And what a day already at Fenway Park as they open the ballpark up early, Tom, to let everybody get in and see a lot of the great memorabilia that Ted Williams has.
Well, Bob, you were talking, and Jim was just talking about the memories you have of maybe meeting Ted Williams or reading the book. I remember getting The Science of Hitting when I was a kid from my parents. It was a Christmas gift, and it was the most treasured book I had ever seen. It never went too far from the nightstand. It is an amazing day for fans to remember the kid and remember Ted Williams. Right now, we are here at the Diamond Club in Fenway Park. A private reception. A lot of the VIPs and dignitaries who will be taking part in tonight's ceremony are here gathering, getting ready. But the ceremony began quite a long time ago. We might be an hour away from the ticketed tribute. But people have been at Fenway Park all day paying tribute to Ted Williams. Sox ownership actually putting on 2 events in the same day. This morning, it was for free. If you came here at 9 o'clock, the gates opened up and you were allowed to come and pay your remembrances and have your memories one more time about Ted Williams and his great career. A great collection of artifacts and memorabilia here at the ballpark today, and it was all for free. Nearly 10,000 people took advantage of it today. A tremendous start to what will be an amazing day and night. This morning, fans got to walk along hallowed ground at Fenway. That alone would usually be cause for celebration. But on this day, the celebration was centered around a life. We often struggle to come to a proper definition of the word hero. There is no doubt that Ted Williams was the living definition of that word and remains heroic to millions of New Englanders in death.
I was very disturbed when he went into the military again because he was my favorite ball player. But now I understand a lot better that that he was concerned about our country, and he was dedicated not only as a ball player but as a Marine and a Navy pilot. And also a great fisherman, which and I also donate a lot to the Jimmy Fund, and of course mainly because of Ted's pleas. So I felt it was sort of an obligation for me to come out here and pay my respects.
They came to reminisce, to pay their last respects, to reach out and touch the memory of a man who touched so many lives as a player and as a person.
He was a man of character, a man of courage, and a man who didn't run away from his country when he was called, and yet he was able to fulfill a dream, and a dream for all of us here today.
You've been here since 7:30 this morning, and you're coming back. You have tickets for tonight's event.
Oh, yes, I wouldn't miss it tonight. I'm here for my father, Larry Murphy, my mother, who passed away, Franny Murphy, who couldn't be here because she's up there with him now.
If this was a prelude to tonight's ticketed ceremony, then it was a heck of an opening act. All aspects of Ted's life were on display. His baseball skills, his call to duty, his answering the call of charity.
The spirit that was out here today was just great. Regular folks and people in suits and people in shorts and men and women and old-timers and young kids. It was a very fitting salute to Ted Williams, and I'm sure tonight's program will be equally great.
Williams hasn't played in 42 years, but his death has made us think about his amazing accomplishments once more and to tell the stories of his life to the next generation of Red Sox fans.
My father took me many games, and it's kind of the thing you do in Boston, right? You pass it down through the generations, and we've been here for a lot of exciting events, and I wanted him to have a chance to be able to tell his kids that he was here for us.
You see grandfathers walking around with grandchildren, you know, pointing out things, and Ted does transcend the generations. It's just a wonderful spirit out at the ballpark today, too. A nice feeling of celebration and salute and appreciation. I think it's just what we wanted to have happen.
Many of the fans we talked to said they'd be back for tonight's event. Those who weren't coming back said they were thankful for this last chance to remember Williams and for one last chance to bid proper adieu to the kid. Procedures will begin with a procession. A lot of former ball players and dignitaries, and a man who is both a former ball player and a dignitary joins us now, Jerry Remy. Jerry, talk about what Ted Williams means to current baseball fans, to kids who grew up in New England, to major leaguers who came from this area.
Well, Tommy, I think anybody that's been involved in the Red Sox organization in any capacity has the sense that he was the greatest player that ever played for the Red Sox. And unfortunately, you know, it's a different generation, so there are a lot of the folks that probably visited Fenway Park today got their first look at some of the things that he's been able to accomplish throughout his life and on the baseball field, but also off the field in war and, you know, twice going into the service. So, you know, it's a remarkable story, and I think that a lot of the people that may attend tonight or have already this afternoon are going to learn a lot more about Ted Williams than probably they already knew about him. And it's great to be here to see a lot of the, you know, the old Red Sox players just talk. You know, the game never changes. You know, you talk baseball, it's the same now as it was back then, the game itself. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
Out there this morning, watching some of the kids look at some of this memorabilia, and I think maybe that's one thing this all does. You bring those stories up, like you said, learning new things, but also your father's talking to kids about what he meant.
Well, that's the great thing about baseball. You know, what do you do? You know, as soon as you have a little boy or a little girl that's old enough to go to the ballpark, you take her there. It's been that way for years and years, and a lot of these kids are being introduced to a guy that has some accomplishments that will never be topped, maybe, you know. So, you know, and to get a look at his plaque from Cooperstown, that's something maybe you would never see before. And they've done a really nice job of doing a lot of nice things out there and some good things to look at that I think are going to mean a lot to the people.
You've been around this game all your life, but when you were a kid, if someone said you'd be part of Ted Williams' procession...
I never would have believed it. I mean, just to play for the Red Sox was obviously a big thrill for me. To be able to make a career out of playing and then broadcasting with an organization I grew up with from the area, I mean, it's been a blessed life for me. So, you know, I've enjoyed every minute of it. And to be part of ceremonies like this, last year when they celebrated the 100 years, you know, it's all special moments. And, you know, going up to them, you say, oh, you know, it's an off day. You gotta, but, you know, when you get here, you really, really enjoy it. Enjoy
tonight.
I will.
That's Jerry Remy. He'll be part of the procession right now. We go back to the studio to Bob and Jim.
All right, guys, thanks a lot. And that's just the beginning of Tom Caron's stint in the Diamond Club. All of the dignitaries are hopefully going to talk to quite a few of them. And, you know, Jerry makes a good point about Ted Williams. He was one of those guys, Jim, as you hear people say all their little anecdotes, that from the 25th man on the roster to the star player, he really liked to talk baseball, took a lot of the young players under his wings, had so much influence on guys even after he finished playing baseball.
He did. He loved to talk about baseball. He'd grab anybody off the street that wanted to talk about baseball. And he loved the game. He lived for the game. That's why it was surprising that he went into the service on a second stint voluntarily, because he loved this game so much, but he loved this country too. You know, it gave me goosebumps when I saw the crowd walking in front of the wall, and just the, I don't know, it gave me this kind of a goosebumpy feeling, sad feeling to see those people walking around on that ground, you know, because a lot of people have never had the chance to do that, and now they're standing on ground where they had really admired this man.
Well, it's such a tribute to Ted Williams, and still an opportunity. You're sitting at home wondering, you know, should I go out to Fenway Park and be a part of this event? I think it would be crazy right now for anybody to sit at home and say, I'm not going to go out there and be part of this. We have an outline of what's going to take place tonight. It really is special, and the Red Sox are going to incorporate a lot of the former players in an entire program tonight to celebrate Ted Williams. And as you mentioned, Jim, it's not just about Ted Williams, the baseball player, because he was so much more than that. His stint in the service is something that I think, especially in these days, we talk about September 11th and talk about patriotism. Ted Williams had it long before it became fashionable.
Could you imagine a player today saying, "Nah, I don't want to play anymore. I want to go to service, I want to fight for my country. It just wouldn't happen. He was above everybody else. And that's why people respect him, and that's why they're here today.
All right, we're all part of this big event here at Fenway Park. Tom Caron's down at the Diamond Club. Jerry Remy's down there as well. And right now, Don Orsillo, the voice of the Red Sox here on Nesson, he's up in the booth. Donnie.
Bob, how you doing? We're doing very well up here as we get ready for tonight's momentous event here at Fenway Park, and the people starting to come into the ballpark. There are many different things that are going to take place here tonight. The things that we can tell you that already are around the ballpark, we'll now take a look at. As some of this was here today for a lot of the fans that came in during the day, as we take a look at the number 9, which is in left field. There are flowers all the way through the number 9 out there. That is going to be a very big part of tonight's event. We're told towards the end of the event, and we look forward to that. Also, the shirt, the number 9 depicted in center field. That's in straightaway center field, and that will be out there throughout the entire event tonight also. And there are some numbers that are around the infield, certainly special numbers. The third base side has the number 406. Of course, the last hitter in the major leagues to hit over 400 back in 1941, Ted Williams. In the second base area, right around second base, the U.S. Marine Corps, certainly very close to the heart of Ted Williams and a very big part of his life documented there around the bag at second. And then as we make our way across the infield back towards first base, 521, of course, the number of home runs that Ted Williams hit as a member of the Boston Red Sox. So tonight is really going to be an amazing night. Certainly here at Nesson, we are thrilled to be able to bring you this coverage tonight. We'll have it all for you from the field. We'll be up here, myself and Jerry Remy, throughout the telecast tonight, bringing you some of this, as well as anchoring the event from up top here, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We now send it back down to the studio and Bob Rogers. Bob?
Hey, Donnie, personal thoughts. I mean, you're the broadcaster for the Red Sox. You know, that's a dream come true, but to be part of this organization that Ted Williams is really the centerpiece for, just, you know, your observations as you look out at the ballpark tonight, it must really be special.
Well, it certainly is, and I think you look at all the people that have come back for this. I think a lot of deaths could have taken place in the Red Sox family over the years, and you certainly wouldn't have had the number of people coming back to be part of this tonight. Everybody wants to be a part of this tonight, Bob, and to me, looking at his numbers, they stand by themselves, but the kind of man that Ted Williams was is the thing that really sticks out for me. The service to his country, what he's done for the Jimmy Fund, and I think certainly that tonight will be celebrated more than anything else. I think it's an incredible event. I'm glad that the Red Sox have taken it on and done something like this. I think inviting people to the ballpark, Ted Williams may be the only name that would bring this many people out.
No doubt. All right, Donnie, we'll be checking in again in a little bit.
Okay, Bob.
All right, Don Orsillo right now in the broadcast booth. Jerry Remy, by the way, is going to have a very big role in this event. I had a chance to look at the outline, so that's going to be very interesting. Again, tickets still available if you want to come down to the ballpark and be part of it. If not, sit back in your living room and watch this entire event for us tonight here on Nesson. Again, commercial free. Now, we have a special program here on Nesson called Remembering the Kid, as we want to kind of get you up to date on this brilliant career, this brilliant life. It's a tribute to Ted Williams.
I'll never forget the first time we saw him. We had press conferences in Sarasota every night at 5 o'clock. And I said, gentlemen, anytime we're not having this press conference, all you have to do is just sit down at your typewriter and think of something pertaining to Ted Williams, who's a whole lot like Babe Ruth. There's a story a minute.
And Theodore Samuel Williams left many inscribed in the pages of his 20-year career as baseball's greatest hitter. A young, cocky and brash 19-year-old, he signed March 3rd, 1938 with the Boston Red Sox after a year with his hometown San Diego Padres in the Pacific Coast League.
Ted's standing right in front of me. And big, lanky kid and all excited, you know, to get in there. In those days, they didn't have the scouts like they have now, and you had to come in for a tryout, and somebody arranged it probably. Frank Schoenbach was pitching batting practice, who was the manager of the team. And I remember he called in, he said, let the kid get in and hit a few. Well, all the old players around the batting cage, you hear them grumbling, oh, geez, this kid's going to be taking up our time batting practice now. Ted got in and hit, I think, 6, 7 balls, something like that. And I think 1 or 2 maybe out of the park, at least 1 out of the park and another up against the fence. So we didn't have anybody in our club that could even hit the right field fence. So when Ted got through hitting, I remember somebody standing on the, I was on the first base side of the batting cage, and this fellow was on the third base side of the batting cage, and he made the statement, well, this kid will be signed before the week's out.
I might have been fresh, you know, I probably was, but it wasn't that I really wanted to act cocky or anything. It was just something that was the way I acted, and I think a lot of times it was, I was probably trying to put on a front, not to try to impress anybody, just that's just the way I was. I certainly didn't mean to let them think I could make baseball history or anything.
The only thing I remember is I lived in the southwestern part of the United States, and Boston was way, way up in the northeastern part of the United States. And I thought, boy, how did all this happen? They're going to get me away from here as far as they can get me in the United States. But I look back now, and I know it was one of the luckiest breaks I ever got.
The kid, as he was dubbed by Red Sox clubhouse boy Johnny Orlando, took some flack from veteran outfielders Doc Kramer, Joe Vosnick, and Ben Chapman when he was assigned to the minor league team, the Minneapolis Millers, later that year. Tell him I'll be back and I'm going to make more money than all 3 of them put together, he told him. And he did just that. The kid drove in 142 runs, hit .366 with 43 home runs down on the farm. The Red Sox called him back the following year, and he never went down again.
You know, they traded a 365 hitter, Ben Chapman, that year to make room for me, and I had a lot of statistics coming out of the minor leagues, but, you know, first year in the big leagues, I wasn't all sure what was going to happen. However, the pitching I saw in the spring, I felt like I could hit, but I had a hard time getting started. In fact, the only year I wasn't picked on an all-star team was that year, and I had a hard time getting started. I was hitting .267 at the all-star break. I ended up hitting .328, and I don't know what the figure is, .267 at the all-star, and it ended up .328, but I must have hit pretty good the last half.
It's pretty hard to forget your first opening day in your home park. And I hit a home run that day. I hit a curveball off of him, and I hit it in right center field bleachers. Big thrill for a kid, you know, coming in, home crowd and all the rest of it. I had already walked into the ballpark a couple of times, and I was fairly well acclimated. But being in front of your home crowd, you know, the first time, why, that was quite exciting.
That 1939 rookie season, Ted Williams led the majors in RBI with 145. He was 3rd in home runs with 31. Those who challenged the young kid at the plate soon learned that his amazing ability to hit the long ball would be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. An amazing talent that earned him yet another title, the Splendid Splinter.
It was in my first year, and I'm hitting against Red Ruffing. Oh, a great right-hander and a sneaky fastball. You think you're going to hit it, but you better quicken up at the end or you're going to lose it. And I hit one Memorial Day. They got some seats painted out there that were hit good, but that ball, I hit as hard as I ever hit a ball. I was a little charged up for playing the Yankees. A couple men on, I was charged up. And this ball, oh, boy, did I hit it smack. And it went up into those right field bleachers just like a bullet. And I'll never, never, never forget that hit.
In 1940, Red Sox owner Tom Yawkey constructed bullpens in the right field of Fenway Park, an area that became known as Williamsburg for the left-handed slugger who used them for target practice.
Well, you know, it's the toughest year of my career, the second year, and I'll always say the second year is a tough year, especially if you've had a good year to start with, because now they've been awakened and they're going to pitch a little different, and a young hitter, it's going to take them a little while to see that they don't pitch the same way they used to. So I had a harder time, and then they brought the fence in, you know.
That year, Williams made his first appearance in the All-Star game.
The circumstances of being a young player, doing something for the first time in front of the greatest audience at the time that I'd ever played before, because it was an All-Star game.
In 1941, the Red Sox winter was splendid as bat met with ball time and time again for one of the most dramatic seasons of all time.
Ted says, geez, they sent bats to me here in St. Louis. He said, I don't know why, but he said, and he had 2 bats there, and I went away for a minute or 2 outside, and I came back, and he's shaving off the handles, getting them to fit him, and all the shavings are on my bed. And I said, what in the world are you doing? Then he got up to swing. You know, he's looking in the mirror. He did take a swing, and down goes my poster bed. He said, geez, he said, he wasn't worried about the bed. He said, call him, get another bed up here.
In 1941, when we went to the All-Star game, we were together. We were at the lobby of the Book Cadillac Hotel in Detroit, and Ted went up to Mr. Hilrick. He was the founder of the bat factory. He said, Mr. Hilrick, he says, I want some 32-ounce bats. And I can remember Mr. Hilrick throwing his hands up. He says, Ted, you can't get good wood in 32-ounce bats. And Ted says, what good is wood if you can't handle it? But Ted could handle a 35-ounce but what Ted's theory was, if he could take a 32-ounce bat and be that much quicker to hit every ball on the fat part of the bat, he was going to be better than taking the 35-ounce bat and maybe just miss him.
With 2 out in the bottom of the 9th and trailing the National League by 1, Williams hit a game-winning 3-run homer to give the American League a 7-5 victory.
Yes, hitting that home run in the All-Star game in the 9th inning was certainly a big thrill, and I'll never forget the rest of my life.
His friend and rival, Yankee Clipper Joe DiMaggio, was there to meet him as he brought the victory home.
I've always been happy that Joe was there to meet me, because he was hitting just ahead of me, and I was hitting behind him, and there never was a greater ball player than Joe DiMaggio.
Both players, both friends, had extraordinary seasons as DiMaggio narrowly edged Williams for the American League MVP with his record-breaking 56-game hitting streak. Nevertheless, Teddy Ballgame engraved his own mark in the record books by batting an overall .406, the first player to hit over 400 in 11 years, and the only one since.
At the beginning of the year, he missed a bunch of games on account of his ankle, and several times during the year he would re-injure it, but he still hit the .406. And he said later on that he actually had a hairline fracture of the ankle. So in a sense, he played most of 41, which would, you know, medically you'd even call it a broken ankle, and flare up from time to time and have to have it taped.
Really, the phenomenal thing about that year, the year I hit 400, was the fact that I had got off to such a great start, with that kind of a start, pinch hitting mostly, and then the weather got warm, and then I just carried on. I was 400 all year, and well over 400, you know. Pretty near didn't make it.
With Williams' average at 399.5 going into a doubleheader on the final day of the season in Philadelphia, there was question as to whether or not number 9 would be in the lineup. He and manager Joe Cronin recall that day differently.
The year you did hit 400, you went into a doubleheader on the last day, and you were just under, as I remember. What were you, about 399 or something going on?
Well, I was 399.8.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Now, you obviously, wanted to hit 400, and after you hit 400 in the first game, is it true that Joe said you could sit out the second game?
Yes, it is, and I just, I felt pretty confident, and I thought, well, I might as well just go on out and play the second game, which I did, and I got a couple more hits that game.
Well, that was a fantastic
So I
year.
look back now, I'm glad that's the way it happened, because they'd always say, well, he might not have done it if I had sat out. So as it turned out, I'm glad that I did play.
He got 6 hits in that day, and after he had the 3 hits in the first game, we went in and had our ice cream and came out. And Jack Mulaney of the Boston Post at that time came down and says, he's hitting over 400. Is he going to play? And looked around and Ted didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and we never thought anything about it. We never gave it a thought. And I read in the paper where Ted said that he knew what I would have told him anyway if he asked me, and I think he's right.
I wasn't even conscious, and I don't think anybody thought that it would be that important to me that I would hit 400, because, you know, I happen to be the last guy, and I think it'll be done again, but here it is 40 years. Yeah, 40 years later.
He said if he was being paid $30,000 a year, the very least he could do was to hit 400, and with that, he earned his first of 6 batting titles. The next came the following year, 1942, when the kid also captured his first Triple Crown. While the All-Star game that year at New York's Polo Grounds didn't have quite the same drama, Ted Williams remembered it fondly.
The greatest exhibition of long hitting that I ever saw was in the batting practice of that game. Gee whiz. American League was hitting them over the roof and over the stands, and I know that had a little wake-up call to the National League as they were watching us hit, because we hit balls all over the county. But Vandermeer was pitching, and he had great stuff. And finally, Rudy York hit one. And here's the diamond, and Rudy York never hit one out that way. It's always that way. Sure enough, he hit a little home run down the right field line. The American League won the game.
Williams did win his second batting title later that year, but the events of the world had begun to take effect on America's favorite pastime. Williams enlisted in the Navy. During his physical, it was determined that he had remarkable 20/10 vision. He said, "People always told me that my natural ability and good eyesight were the reasons for my success as a hitter. They never talk about my practice, practice, practice."
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The kid's first love of the game would be replaced for the next 3 years by another, that of flying as a Marine.
Just incredible watching that. And Jimmy, when I watch it and I hear Ted Williams speak, you almost feel like he's part of your family. Doesn't it seem that way?
He's like your grandfather John Wayne. Right. And the way he remembers every pitch, it's amazing how the age he made it to, but he could go back 40 years ago and tell you the sequence of pitches that a guy threw him and where he hit the ball. That's amazing.
Not only the at-bats that he's had, but maybe the guy that's hitting in front of him. Yeah. He was the king of when somebody comes back after having a hit or a strikeout. What was the pitch? What happened? Guys are like, I don't know, I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I was just swinging at it. He could pinpoint everything, who he did it against, when he did it. That's what's amazing. I know a couple other players that have been around that you could tell stories that have been playing for 20 years. Dennis Eckersley can do the same thing. He can tell you a certain situation in 1983 when he was pitching somebody. Absolutely. And what that guy did.
Wade Boggs was an awful lot like that as well.
He can do it.
You talk about the 400. You talk about the 400 season, Jimmy. And you think back, 1941. That was only his third full season in the big leagues. So they hit 400 at that point, and also have the home runs to go with it. It was really an amazing year. That was also the year in the All-Star game. You may remember the whole Ephus pitch situation with Rip Sewell on the hill and Teddy saying, "Don't you throw me that junk." And Rip Sewell did the first one. Ted Williams will take it. And Sewell said, "It's coming again." So what does Williams do? Look how far up in the box he is. He's about 2 feet out of the box. And he sends it out. And even Sewell had a big smile on his face. Everybody, big laugh on that one.
It was, but, they called him a splendid splinter. It's amazing. He wasn't that big of a guy. And if you look at his stats, the doubles, homers, and triples, he had a pretty amazing. So it shows you how efficient his swing really was. They said he used a 32-ounce bat, so he had serious bat speed. Ernie Banks used a small bat, too, a 32-ounce bat. So these guys generated some bat speed to get that pop. Because he didn't have guns.
And Jimmy, those
they didn't have the Android and the...
And you know what? I guarantee you, he wouldn't take it anyway.
Hot dogs.
He wouldn't take it. But he holds that bat like it's his baby, too. You see it, and he's like,
he's whittling the handle down. I'm telling you, he handled it better than the furniture he had in his house.
One other interesting stat, and there are so many stats to go with Ted Williams, but there's one stat, one baseball record that he shares with Rickey Henderson. Do you know what it is? It's an amazing stat when you think about it. He's the only guy, along with Rickey Henderson, to have a stolen base in 4 different decades.
Wow.
And he only had 24 career stolen bases, so it's pretty good. I think Rickey had him.
He picked his spots.
Rickey had him in the speed category, no question about that. But again, and then the military service interrupting his career, and it's amazing that he comes back, and almost immediately when he comes back, he picks up where he left off.
Yeah, well, they must have been throwing to him when he wasn't flying the planes, but he hit 521 home runs, and if you look at the stats here, he basically missed 5 seasons. If he averaged 35 to 40 home runs a season, he would have eclipsed the 700 mark. And who knows, maybe he might have hung. You don't know what would happen those years. He was in his prime, so he might have got the 45 home runs. He might have passed Babe Ruth at that time.
You know, they're telling me too, by the way, I got to give one other guy his due, because Tim Raines is in that category as well, a stolen base in every decade. 2,019 career walks, so a lot like Barry Bonds, a guy that hits a lot of home runs, also walks a lot. The difference, I guess, between Bonds and Williams is that, you know, Ted Williams always hit for a much greater average.
He did. Bonds doesn't hit with the average. Ted Williams is in a class by himself when it comes to power and average and on-base percentage, slugging percentage. They only made one of them.
They certainly did. You know, Ted Williams talk a lot about his baseball, but we also talk about his great war record, and somebody that he knows very well, Senator John Glenn, now standing by in the Diamond Club with Tom Caron. TC?
Bob, thank you very much. Senator Glenn, talk about this evening, what it means to be here tonight, and what Ted Williams means. I guess certainly since last September, we sort of hold that term hero up to a higher standard, but he certainly fits that mold.
Well, you know, I'm glad you're having this here tonight, and I'm honored to be participating in it, because I think, you know, Ted set some remarkable records, and he was a remarkable guy, in addition to baseball. And I appreciate all those baseball records, some of which have never been broken yet, let alone surpassed in any way. But some of the remarks I want to make tonight when we have that chance are about something even bigger than baseball, and that's Ted's devotion to this country, patriotism. We served together in Korea, and he flew about half the missions he flew as my wingman, so I got to know Ted very well. And those bonds of shared combat are something that you don't forget. And I've seen Ted many times in the last few years, and while he's been having some of these problems, and you always want to talk about some of our experiences out there and some of the things we did together, and some of the combat missions that we both shared on. He got hit a couple of times, once very bad. He was lucky to survive that one. So we talked about all those things.
Flying sorties over Korea, all the home runs in the world won't help you up there.
No.
Talk about his courage and
well, you know, I think though there is one thing that goes through this. Ted was dedicated to excellence and doing his very best in whatever he tried. In baseball, he was probably the greatest student of how to hit baseball that there's ever been in that sport. And when he came to Korea, why, I think his dedication to trying to do as equally an excellent job in flying out there as a Marine fighter pilot. And out there he was Captain Ted Williams, and he was in the squadron, and he wasn't given any special treatment or anything like that. He was one of the guys, and he was out there on those combat missions trying to dig them out just like everybody else, making low-level runs. Got hit by a rock, a big rock that went up through his tip tank once he was that low from an explosion on the ground. And they got hit another time by anti-aircraft fire, and there was a fire around the engine on the airplane that normally would have blown up. But he was lucky, came back in, radio's out, hydraulic system was out, couldn't get the gear down, slid the plane up the runway on his belly, and got out and watched it burn on the runway. So he was a good combat pilot.
Senator, baseball fans love to say, boy, if he hadn't gone back to Korea, the numbers he would have put up. But to him, it was a no-brainer, right? His country needed him. He was going to answer the call.
No, that's right. And in later years, I saw a quote after his passing on the other day. I saw a quote out of the paper, and somebody had talked to him about that, what his record might have been. And I think he said something about he thought he got more out of while he might have made other records he didn't know. Nevertheless, he had the experiences in the Marine Corps that he wouldn't trade for those years either. So he was as dedicated a Marine as there ever came down the pike, and he loved to talk about it.
Now, there's enough pressure when you're flying combat missions, but did you ever hear it from anybody back home? When you got Ted Williams on board, you got to take care of that plane.
Well, Ted was in a separate airplane. We were flying fighter aircraft. We only had one pilot, so we flew together and looked out for each other. But no, out there he was just a regular member of the squadron, and that was it. And he was treated that way, and that's the way he would want to have been treated too. If any, he was not the kind of guy that came in the ready room and said, "Let me tell you about baseball." But if somebody asked a question about baseball or games or wanted to talk about it, why, he was happy to sit and talk about it. But he didn't force baseball talk on it. Of course, you're out there in a combat squadron. You're pretty well concentrated on what you're doing. And Ted fit in. He did a good job and did a great job while he was out there.
I'll ask you finally, you said he was so committed to excellence, and you saw it whether he was flying a plane for the Marines or at bat. He was a great fly fisherman.
Yeah.
It seemed like whatever he did, he would become obsessed and dedicated to being his best.
He dedicated himself to it. It's just like he was the greatest student of hitting, I guess, that there's ever been in baseball. And when he came back in, he'd been through a refresher course for jet flying, but he was still learning, still wanted to know how you sighted and what techniques you use to pick out your targets on the ground, and all the things that go into being a good combat fighter pilot.
People often ask, is somebody a hero? Ted Williams, as heroic as they go?
Oh, yeah. Well, Ted, you know, was he was as dedicated. I got a kick out of somebody's write-up after his passing on the other day where someone had asked him, so the reporter said, what his favorite music was. And he said 3 songs, The Star-Spangled Banner, the Marine Hymn, and Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And I think that just about summarizes Ted Williams. That was his view on things. It was pretty straightforward.
That's wonderful. Senator Glenn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to see you.
That's Senator John Glenn. Speaking of one American hero from another American hero, let's go back to Bob and Jim.
No doubt about it, Tommy. What a treat to have all these special guests. Even in the background, I couldn't help but notice some of the guys walking around. Ned Martin is here tonight, Ken Coleman, Kirk Gowdy, and of course, Senator John Glenn. And, you know, Jimmy, we're all
blessed to have the stories, the things that people don't hear. You know, you hear about stats. I mean, you see stats, you see a guy play, but the behind-the-scenes stories that you don't get to hear, I love that stuff.
You know, we all only have one life to live, and it's a soap opera too, by the way, isn't it? But we all only have one chance around, and Ted Williams certainly took advantage of his chance. And again, still a chance for you to get to the ballpark tonight. This is one of the items they're giving out as you come in. Incredible portrait of some of the great memorabilia that, can you see that a little bit? Let's see if you can get that over on this camera over here, because a lot of the great events, one of the headlines here is about Ted Williams going to make $80,000 to $100,000, Jim, and that was big news back then. And also, let me show you this, too. This is one of the tickets. Let's stay right on that camera there. This is the ticket that you'll get when you come in tonight. Again, this is one of those collectibles that you'll always remember. Oh, there we go. We got it upside down. There's the ticket, and truly some great items. And also, John Updike's great essay from October 22nd, 1960 in you know, incredible form. So, again, a chance to get to the ballpark tonight and be part of this truly special event. And right now, we're going to go back to Remembering the Kid right here on Nesson.
Fenway was packed again. Oh, yeah, a lot of excitement all through baseball in '46. You know, with Greenberg back and the DiMaggio back and the great Yankees back all over the league and all. And the crowds were tremendous. Everybody was hungry for baseball again. We had a kind of a big 4 pitching staff for Tex Houston, Joe Dobson, Mickey Harris, and myself. And you were supposed to go 9 innings. If you didn't, you kind of felt bad about yourself. It's a different world now.
1946 marked the return from war of many of the great baseball legends, including Ted Williams. And what a homecoming for Fenway fans. For the first time, the All-Star game came to Boston, and once again, Williams would give them a game to remember.
I think that's a special occasion for anybody that gets into an All-Star game to be at home. And surprisingly, a lot of the hometown people, hometown players have done well in the All-Star game.
He knocked out 2 home runs that day, including the first ever hit off of Pittsburgh's Rip Sewell's famed Ephus pitch with its 20-foot arc that looked more like a pop fly.
Rip Sewell, an outstanding pitcher, had great success this year with that pitch. And it was a pitch that he'd step and then he'd throw high. It had tremendous trajectory. I've never seen a pitch like it. The most phenomenal part of it was he got it over the plate. He could drift it down and get a strike with it. And nobody hit a home run on it. And he came into the All-Star game, and we American Leaguers were all talking about it. And we pretty much agreed nobody could hit one out. Dickie looked at me, though, and he said, you can hit one out. And he threw that pitch to me, and the first one was just a ball, and I really got that thing timed good because it was floating up there at me. And then he threw another one, and I swung from my heels and happened to hit it just right. The wind's blowing out that day,
and it made the bullpen.
The kid hit another home run that day in the American League's 12-0 victory, one so astonishing that the ball's landing spot is permanently marked by a red C. 38 rows up in the stands, 502 feet from home plate.
How about the day you hit one out Freddie Hutchinson? You made him so mad.
Well, he was kind of a hot-tempered fellow anyway, Freddie, and a great fellow, and he came into Fenway, and apparently he'd been having a little bit of trouble anyway, and he came in here, and the wind was really blowing out into right field, and I hit a ball off him. I got it, one of them balls that you hit hard, but you still get plenty of elevation to it, and that ball just kept going, and I remember it went up 38 rows in the right field, and I don't think a ball's ever been hit any further in right field since I've been here than 38 rows, and the reason I know it was a 38th row is because he took a picture of a fellow, hit a guy in a straw hat up there and broke his straw hat. I thoroughly enjoyed the All-Star games. I'll tell you why I did more than any other thing. My greatest interest in baseball was hitting, of course. And I wanted to see all the good pitchers. And I couldn't wait to get up and see Derringer. I couldn't wait to get up and see Vandermeer. I couldn't wait to get up there and see Bucky Walters. And it was a continual craving. I wanted to see those pitchers that motivated me the most.
On July 14th, in a doubleheader with the Indians at Fenway, the Williams shift was born. After Williams hit 3 home runs off Cleveland, their manager, Lou Boudreau, shifted most of his fielders to the right side of the diamond in an attempt to counter Williams's long ball drives to the right side.
And I thought, well, this is something. Well, I tried to bunt, and it didn't work. And so I thought, well, the heck with this bunt. And so I went away and hit. And I remember that day I did lose 2 base hits, hard hit balls down towards right field here, and the second baseman threw me out. And I just thought, well, I won't see any more of that anyway. But actually, they started to concentrate on pitching me, so I had to pull. They started to concentrate on this shift. And that year that they pulled the shift, I hit 400 and something against Cleveland, and they had a real good pitching staff. The next year with the very same pitching staff, I hit 250 or something. And all went along, I remember I worried about that so much because I felt like, gee, they won the pennant, and of course they said that I didn't hit against Cleveland partly because we didn't win the pennant and all this and that, and which is probably partly true. And so the next year I made it a point to try to hit the left field a little bit more, and I also laid for the one pitch. They were playing me to pull, and they pitched me low and inside, and I moved a little bit further away from the plate, and boy, that ball became a ball I really creamed, and I got to where I was pounding them into right field and hitting them over there because I was a little further away from the plate, and if the ball's away, I'd go on out that way. Before I knew it, I hit over 400 against them again that year.
I almost felt sorry for baseball. I felt like, gee, what are they trying to do? Make a joke out of this thing, you know? But they weren't. I could see they weren't.
A lot of people say, well, I was a hard-head and never did, but I did lead the American League officially 4 times after that.
That following September, Sox pitcher Tex Hewson made one promise: get me a run and we'll win. So Ted Williams did just that. With a home run to left field in Cleveland, the Red Sox pulled out a 1-0 victory for the 1946 pennant. It was Williams' only inside-the-park home run of his career.
I was learning how to tie flies the night they were celebrating winning the 46 pennant, and there was no slight on me at all. Champagne didn't mean anything to me at that time.
The World Series that year would be the only championship appearance for Ted Williams, and it was a disappointing one as well.
They had a lousy World Series. I never blame this, but I got hit on the elbow before, and I really, in my heart, still don't think that had a damn thing to do with it. But I got a big old bump on my elbow. But the big thing is that I just, you know, the first ball I hit in that series, I hit a line drive against the fence, 6 inches foul, you know. Well, I got 1 for 4 that day. And then the next day I went 0 for 3. And then the next day I went 1 for 4. Well, you know, it didn't take long and in the series hitting 200. But I walked a lot of times in the series.
Williams hit only 200 against the Cardinals, but the Red Sox still managed to push the series to the full 7 games. It was in the 8th inning that Enos Country Slaughter scored from first base on a single to left center by Harry the Hat Walker to break a 3-3 tie. Despite a meager performance in the World Series, Williams was awarded the American League MVP award, and there were rumors of a trade with his Yankee pal Joe DiMaggio beginning to spread.
That was in the works. But like I said, the two owners were out on the town, and they discussed it, and they talked about it, you know. And of course, when they got up the next morning, I don't know who called who, and they said, look, what we talked about last night better not happen, because one of us might be lynched.
I don't think I would have liked it. Joe Cronin once told me, he said, there'd be two things that you might regret in your life. He said, one is that you didn't have more speed. You could beat out a lot of hits. And the other thing is, he said, you might regret that you never played in New York. Well, I certainly, I never really felt that way about playing in New York.
But Williams and DiMaggio shared more than just a friendship and a rivalry on the diamond. They also had a tremendous respect for one another.
Joe DiMaggio, I saw more Joe DiMaggio, and I said in my book, he was the greatest player I ever saw.
He was the greatest hit I ever saw.
Ah, yes, Fenway Park is starting to fill up, and of course you can see the field is decorated, and the most important number of the night, Jimmy, is the number 9 out there in left field. There are flowers out there on the field. I have never seen Fenway look like this.
No, it's looking beautiful. They've done a great job. The field looks great. It's going to be a great evening. I can't wait.
Watching this Remembering the Kid piece, and you talk about the possible trade of Ted Williams from the Red Sox to the Yankees. What would we be dealing with here in Boston now if that ever happened?
Well, you can see why they did talk about it. You know, Fenway Park had the short left field wall. Yankee Stadium had the short right field wall. So when they had that talk, they thought that, you know, those players, if they switched places, would even put up bigger numbers.
I like what Ted said, though. I wouldn't go if they did it anyway. He'd say, hey, I'm quitting. See you later. I'm not going to play for those Yankees. Tom Caron down at the Diamond Club now with Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig.
Thanks very much. Joining me now is Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig, and talk about this night, the enduring hold that Ted Williams still has on this region, certainly, but the game of baseball as a whole.
Remarkable. It, you know, I think back to the All-Star game in 1999, and of all the emotional things I've seen in my career, and now spans 38 or 40 years, I don't think that night that Ted came in on a cart, I don't think either in the stands or on the field I've ever seen more emotion. It was absolutely remarkable, and it was one of the great thrills of my baseball career, and it was great for me because I got to know Ted and talked to him a lot after that, and you know, he achieved what he set out to. When he was a kid, he said when he walked down the street, they wanted him to say, there goes the greatest hitter that ever lived. And in my judgment, he achieved that. And he has an enormous hold, not only here, not only in New England, but all over America.
We've been talking a lot about the generational hold the Red Sox have on New England, and certainly Ted Williams. My father watched him play, and I tell my son about how he played. That moment in '99, when all of today's superstars were running around him like the Beatles were at Shea Stadium, yeah. It was an amazing moment.
It was an amazing moment. I don't think on a field you'll ever see that again in any sport. I've never seen so much emotion, so many people who cared, and it was a great tribute to Ted. But not only that, I watched the emotion in the stands. I know where I was seated in the commissioner's box, there were people who had been Red Sox season ticket holders for years, and they wept. And I remember talking to them afterwards, and they said to me, you don't understand, this was us the last 40 or 50 years, and it's a great tribute to Ted Williams in every way.
It has not been the easiest summer for baseball, as you read the papers every day. To be here tonight and to celebrate a life like this, what does this mean both to you and the game?
It means a lot. This is what the game is all about. It's wonderful history. It's wonderful tradition. It's just absolutely wonderful, and I'm proud to be here tonight, and on behalf of everybody in baseball, this is just a great night, and I hope that this is the kind of thing we can preserve as we go forward, because this is what makes our sport so unique and just so enduring to generations of fans.
I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't ask you for an update, and there are negotiations this week. Where are we right now, and where are things going?
Well, we've had quite a few talks. We start again Wednesday. We have 3 more days this week. We have every day next week. So I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm hopeful that some way, somehow, we We've had 8 work stoppages in my baseball career, and we have to figure a way around it.
Commissioner Seelig, thank you, and enjoy tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here.
That's Commissioner Bud Seelig. We go back to our Nesson studio right now.
All right, Tommy and Jimmy, we got to find a way to track down Bud Seelig tonight to give him our plan. You know, to resolve this whole thing.
We will do that. After the show, we'll go down the field, give him our little highlight.
I love when...
I don't think Donald Furr is going to go for it, but Seelig might.
Bud Seelig talking about the All-Star game here at Fenway Park, and it was one of those nights, again, that's etched in your memory that you'll never forget. I know you were at the park. I was as well, but it's so emotional to watch the players, how they responded to Ted Williams.
You could see their eyes light up and the smiles on their faces, and they knew they were in the presence of, you know, the greatest hitter that ever lived, and then they just wanted to touch him, shake his hand, you know. Maybe some of that luck would rub off on them.
And then throwing out the first pitch as well. One of the things I wondered when watching this, you look at all these great players that surround Ted Williams.
He looks sad to me. Ted looks like he had a tear in his eye there, too, like it was emotional for him.
Oh, it was very emotional for him, I think, to see how he was received and to see how these
right
guys
what
reacted
does
to him.
right here. You know, smiling at somebody else like, hey, there he is, you know. But, you don't get a chance to do that very often.
You know, Jim, one of the big parts of this new Red Sox ownership group, people wondering if, you know, guys from outside of New England could appreciate what the Red Sox mean to fans here in New England. They certainly have, as evidence to everything that's happened at this point this year, including tonight here at Fenway Park. And standing by now down on the Diamond Club with Tom Caron, it's Larry Lucchino. Tommy?
Yeah, thanks very much, Bob. First of all, Larry, let's talk about this morning a little bit. I saw you out there while it was going on, and I said 10,000, but now the final count is more like 12,000. Considering that's just half of the day, that's a pretty amazing number.
It was an amazing number and an amazing event. I would say opening the gates to Fenway has a certain special magic at any time, but connected to Ted and with the ballpark spruced up with the Ted Williams memorabilia and photographs, it was a very special occasion. I think there was a very good spirit in the ballpark.
You saw people milling about the ballpark. People were thrilled, first of all, just to be out on the ballpark. And then as you came out towards the Monster and saw the memorabilia and got to the plaque from Cooperstown, you could almost see the chills on people's spine.
I saw people young and old. I saw people in suits and shorts. I saw children. I saw grandparents. It was a wide range of socioeconomic demographics here, and I saw one young man who was probably in his mid-30s who had been to come to games for years and years. He was crying. Now, there were not so many tears as there were cheers and smiles and good feelings, but I think it touched a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
You've been around the game a long time. You knew what Ted Williams meant to the game of baseball and to anyone involved in it. Now that you've been in New England a while, was that even up another level when you found out just what he means here in New England?
I had a great appreciation and admiration for Ted as a player, and I had the good fortune to get to know him in San Diego because that was his other hometown, but I had no sense of the pervasive loyalty and admiration there was for him and is for him in New England. It is breathtaking. And I think today is a suitable celebration, not a memorial service, but a suitable celebration of the life of an extraordinary man.
Okay, I want to ask you finally, we talked about it this morning, the generations who pass on stories, and maybe that's the beauty of all of baseball, but here in New England, the Red Sox mean so much over the generations, and Ted Williams maybe personifies that to a T. My father watched him play. I tell my son about Ted Williams, and maybe an event like this sort of brings those stories out one more time.
I think it absolutely does. Again, we're talking about the various ages at the event this morning. A lot of children, and you see 2 and 3 generations of people walking around. And I think Ted was transcended generations in a way that only superstars really can. And particularly superstars who have so much to offer. We're talking about a military hero. We're talking about a man who helped make the Jimmy Fund what it is today, and we're talking about the greatest hitter that ever was. There's enough in there for everyone of all generations.
I got to say, for those of you watching at home, it has been an amazing amount of work for the Red Sox to get this off. There's going to be some sleep after this homestand, but it's been a tired couple of days. I hope you all get to enjoy it tonight as well.
Thank you. It was a labor of love for the people in the Red Sox front office, and I want to thank Mayor Menino and the people from City Hall who were enormously helpful in helping us pull this together in such a short time.
Larry, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
That's Larry Lucchino. Let's go back to our Nesson studios.
All right, Tommy, these guys get things done looking out at the ballpark, not just all the stuff on the field, but above the Monster. You see those great big billboards up there as well. So talk about people that can get things done. These
Pretty
guys
soon
do.
we're going to see seats up there, you know, looking down at left field. They're doing whatever they can. They really love the game, and they love what they have here. They know this history. and the tradition here, and that's what this night's about, too. It's about history and tradition.
I love when we were talking, watching that, remembering the kid piece, and Ted Williams talking. He's very careful in the words that he used to choose when he talked about Joe DiMaggio, the greatest player that he ever saw, because Ted Williams, he didn't really care about anybody saying that he was the greatest player. Teddy cared about greatest hitter, and that's what he was. One of the other comments, when he talked to Mark McGuire in the All-Star game, I don't know if you remember this, you're good friends with Big Mac, and he said, when you took the swing, Mark, do you ever smell burnt wood?
No, the burnt rawhide. When you foul a ball off, a lot of the hitters have said that you could smell the rawhide, the burnt rawhide when you foul the ball off.
Ted Williams said he only had that happen to him.
He had a lot of senses. He had the eyes, he had 20/10 vision, he had the smell for the game. He had it all going on. He was addicted to this game. He loved the game, you could tell.
But interesting, I was reading a story about Ted Williams and the whole thing about smelling that. I guess it only happened to him 5 or 6 times, and he was so taken by that he would always ask players that. That was one of his favorite questions to ask people, because he didn't know if it was just him. He didn't know if it was just him. He didn't really know what it was he wanted to talk about. But a lot of guys say they don't know what he's talking about.
No, because I don't know why, but it's amazing that he could smell it, because back then you'd have the people smoking cigars in the stands and cigarettes in the stands, and to even be able to smell that smell is pretty incredible.
All right, we're getting close to the event starting at Fenway Park, but we're not quite ready yet to get us an update on where we stand. Let's go back upstairs now to Don Arcilla. Donnie.
All right, Bob, just give you an idea what's going on here. The gates opened just a short time ago, and fans are starting to get into the ballpark and mill about and have a chance to see some of the things that we saw earlier. Of course, the big number 9 that is in left field, and you can see a lot of the fans coming in. I'm sure there are a lot of walk-up fans today, as there were still tickets available for tonight's event. Earlier, you guys showing how many people were here this afternoon for the service here that was held in left field, a chance to walk up and take a look at a great many of the photos, not only from Ted's great playing career, but of course his time spent at war and his contributions to the Jimmy Fund over the years, and all of that will be depicted here tonight as well. Right now, a lot of the dignitaries are down in the Diamond Room. Many have been heard from by Tom Caron so far, but there are a lot more down there. They're going to be getting together and coming out onto the field. At that point, we are told that they'll be coming out from the Diamond Room onto the field at about 6:25, and as they come out, we'll be telling you a little bit about a lot of them. Most of the faces will be extremely familiar, and that comes from former Red Sox players, current Red Sox players, among a lot of the people that Ted was able to touch during the course of his life, not only as a baseball player, but also serving this great country. And you've already seen John Glenn. There are many others as well, and we look forward to bringing you those. But as of right now, the fans are kind of coming into the ballpark and getting ready. Formally, this thing will probably start around 6:25, 6:30. We'll be back with you then from up here in the Red Sox television booth. We send it back down to the studios. Bob?
All right, Donnie, thanks. And, Donnie talked about former Red Sox players, current Red Sox players. I bet you in the stands tonight there are a few future Red Sox players watching this, too. How much of an impact does this kind of thing have on current players?
I think it gives you adrenaline, and it makes you appreciate what you have. Until you sit behind this desk and realize you don't have that uniform on anymore, you can't take any day for granted. And I think the day like this makes you appreciate what you have. It's kind of given me goosebumps to watch all this. It makes me want to have the uniform back on again.
I agree with you 100%. Tom Caron down in the middle of all the festivities down in the Diamond Club. He's going to join us now with filmmaker Ken Burns.
Thanks very much. Ken Burns with us, filmmaker, of course, did a great documentary on baseball. Talk about Ted Williams, a New Englander, a baseball fan yourself, obviously. Why was one man able to really transcend a Hall of Fame career, but it was more than his baseball that made him the icon he was?
Yeah, I think that's the important part. Too often we attribute the characteristics of a hero to people in baseball who just do their job well. It's wonderful, and we, do it all the time in sports, and particularly in baseball, but I think the events of the last year have proven what real heroes are. And so we have to go back to baseball, but in Ted Williams, you've got a real hero. Not only does he give up 5 years of his life to serve his country at the peak of his career, and who knows what those statistics might have been if. But in his first nanosecond of eligibility, he gets elected to the Hall of Fame, where he's perfectly entitled to talk about himself there. But what does he choose to talk about? Where are the Negro Leaguers? Why isn't Josh Gibson? Why isn't Satchel Paige here? And it was really Ted's impetus that caused the Hall of Fame to re-examine it. And in fact, we now have many of the great Negro League players inducted into the Hall of Fame. taking their rightful place against people like Ted Williams. That's heroism in my view.
And obviously, your documentary was, in so many ways, the documentary of the African-American experience through baseball in America.
Well, I'm interested in the way in which baseball is a mirror of who we are. So it told us about where America was since the Civil War. That's why I told people who thought I was nuts that this was the sequel to the Civil War. So it was about the growth and decay and rebirth of great cities. It's about labor and management, of course. It's about popular culture and the nature of heroes. But it's also hugely about race because, of course, for a long time, our national pastime excluded some of the greatest players who've ever lived. In fact, my favorite baseball statistic is that in the years after Jackie Robinson was admitted to the baseball community in the National League, and African Americans were brought in almost in a quota system in the National League, they nevertheless won the MVP award 9 out of the next 11 years. That tells you what we were missing. And I think that for me as a filmmaker, interested in how my country ticks, that's a good story to tell.
And Ted Williams quietly was part of that change. He was very, you know, when there finally were more and more African Americans playing, he went out of his way to let his teammates know that this guy belongs on our team.
Absolutely. And you know, Jackie Robinson had a tough row to hoe in those first few years when he was ordered by Branch Rickey to turn the other cheek. It's not just a great American story, it's almost like a biblical story. And Ted was there saying in our film on camera, this guy had tons and tons of guts. I always remember that. Jackie Robinson had tons and tons of guts. You bet. I think, to borrow from another sport, I think Ted helped set a pick for the great African-American players. And we should be forever in his debt on top of these extraordinary baseball accomplishments that the game would never be the same without him.
Tonight you'll be out on the field with a host of great players, current and past. And again, just as Ted Williams still has a hold on the fans, it's amazing to me the hold he has on the players. In '99, the All-Star game.
Look at that, and I talk about that in my remarks, is that, you know, one of these great moments in all of our lives was watching the order break down and the players, contemporary players, crowding around Ted Williams in the golf cart that night. I mean, if you had a dry eye, then you don't have a beating heart in your breast. And my girls, my daughters were with me, and we'll never forget that evening.
Ken, enjoy yourself tonight.
I'm sure I will. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ken. That's Ken Burns. We go back to our Nesson studio.
Thanks, Tom. Everybody entering the ballpark tonight. We already showed you some of the memorabilia they'll be receiving, but also the Boston Globe insert today. If you haven't picked up a Boston Globe yet today, you'll want to do that because this is some great reading. And I think one of the points that Ken Burns makes is a good one, that when Ted Williams was inducted into the Hall of Fame, that's a time that a lot of players will take to kind of relive their career. He took it as an opportunity to make a statement about the Negro Leagues. And I remember when I first read that, it just, again, one of those things that moves you about the kind of person he was, not the kind of player he was.
Yeah, he was selfless. He really cared about everybody else except for himself. He went out of his way to mention Negro Leagues. He went out of his way for the country. He goes out of his way for people with the Jimmy Fund. You know, so he was a very giving man.
And, you know, we had this Remembering the Kid program. We have all the history of Ted Williams. One of the things that we love to talk about is how he likes to educate people on hitting. He is the authority on hitting a baseball. Let's go back to Remembering the Kid. Get out a pen and paper, too, because you're going to learn something right now.
As an old guy, an older fellow now, and I look back and you know, I wonder sometimes just how did I hit that good? Because it looks awful tough. It looks hard to do, you know. And a lot of guys out there, and they're throwing everything at you, and we've got a lot of defense behind you. But I had a chance to hit some really great pitchers when they were just starting to fade a little bit. Maybe that was my luck in the history of my career.
Ted Williams' science of hitting not only resulted in an extraordinary 20-year career, it also helped many young players in the game.
Any young fellow that's thinking about improving his hitting should think more or less in terms of a ball, let's say, from his waist up, to think in terms of chopping down at that ball, because actually, as you see on the screen here, that as I swing down, I'm thinking of swinging down, but as I swing down, it's a level swing. It's a level swing. Now, by the same adverse reasoning, a ball that's low, I feel or try to think that I'm picking the ball up. And actually, I am trying to uppercut it a little bit, but if you'll see again on the screen that by lifting up and trying to uppercut, that's a level swing again. Here's the swing that's down, and here's the swing that's up, and they're both level swings. So actually what you're doing is chopping. Chopping just like a woodsman would. Up on the low one, down on the high one. Now, I think you can go a step further than that, and if the fellow happens to be strong, we'll say low, much stronger, say, than he is high, then he should just concentrate on swinging down, because his strong point will make up for that factor that he's forever swinging down, and he'll still pick up that ball, because that's his strength. And the same goes for a fellow that might be strong high. Why, he can think of uppercutting a little bit, because actually the reason he is a good high ball hitter probably is that he is a chopper. So the low ball probably caused him a little more trouble, so he can think of terms of trying to lifting balls a little bit more. So if a fellow hits balls in the ground, he should think of lifting up a little bit more. If a fellow hits a lot of pop-ups, he should think about chopping down a little more.
You hit it down in here, you're going to hit it towards the handle. You hit it out here, you're hitting it out towards the end. There's one spot in this bat, you can just ring it and hear it, that ball will ring off the bat. Now, you're talking about hitting a round ball. And if you put the two together, a round 3.5-inch bat, a round 3.5-inch ball, you see there's only 1/4 of an inch there to play with. Now, we'll suppose that there's 4 inches of hitting surface on the bat, and just supposing if you hit this baseball, it's going to flatten out some, you're talking about less than 5 square inches. Now, when you consider the fact that this ball is coming from the pitcher's mound, 60 feet, towards the hitter, and it's on very rare occasions will you ever pick up the ball from the pitcher's hand to where you know exactly what it is, it takes at least half of that time, or about 2/5 of a second, to really determine what that ball is, a curve or a fastball. Now, you're talking about split-second timing to hit this ball on 5 square inches of compact area. And if this is true, with the ball curving, with the ball sliding, with the ball sailing, with the ball sinking, with the knuckleball and everything else, I have to think that it's the hardest single thing to do in baseball, and I think really the hardest single thing to do in sports.
From work in spring training with young Red Sox players over the years to a hire by the Philadelphia Phillies to work with outfielder Von Hayes, Williams continued to be in the game as he passed his skill and strategy on to the next generation of future greats.
I want you to never look down further than here. That's where you pick the ball up, right in here. You start to swing when the guy starts. You know, you make your first move, right? Then when it gets about from here to you, you say, boom, that's it, right? You agree to that? Why would you ever look further back?
I was just in awe that I finally got to meet him.
You play it by ear a little bit. Heck, someday there's a pitcher out there, and I mean, you never saw him. And how can you do any homework on this guy? But you see what he's doing with the first hitter, the second hitter, the 8th hitter, and the 4th inning. Now, how is he doing it? Getting everybody out. What's he getting you on? You ask questions, boom, bam, bam. You know where they're hitting them in the ground, in the air, and you say, bam, I'm going to counter that.
Even as a teenager, Williams' son, John Henry, was picking up pointers from the big kid who was not that much older when he stepped up to the plate of the major leagues in the beginning of an historic career. For Ted Williams, as phenomenal a hitter as he was, he continued to work on his swing right up to his last at-bat.
I remember very well that before I started to play this year, I had a day where I popped up 6 straight times, but every one I was right on the meat of the bat, but I was just under. And I felt confident as I could be, that I knew that once I got straightened away, I was going to start hitting the ball boom, and I did. I had a real good streak. And the biggest problem I run into, though, is after I get in say a line drive or a long fly ball streak, which is what I like because I hit extra base hits and home runs when I do that, that after I do that for a while, I find myself either popping up again or grounding ball. And it's generally ground balling. And that's the worst thing that can happen to me because I can't get hits in the pulling right field with the ground ball because of the defense. And I'm only getting singles when I do. Unless I hit a ball real sharp, I can't get it through. So consequently, I'm a better hitter when I'm hitting the ball in the air. So my biggest problem when I'm hitting is not just hitting the ball, but to hit it on a line or hit it hard in the air. I'm not happy unless I'm doing it. I don't feel like I'm really hitting well unless I am. So, and the other way I get into trouble is when I start pulling too much. I can pull naturally without even thinking about it. But if I start worrying about pulling, and I am pulling too much, pulling balls foul, hitting good balls, balls that ought to be hitting fair into foul territory, well, I know I'm not waiting on the ball. Well, I'm going to get fooled more often. And not only that, I find that I don't line the ball as well. And again, That's always been what I strive for, is to hit the ball hard in the line, hard in the line.
I think there's not a player living, or ever lived, unless it might be Pete Rose. Maybe he'll never feel this way. Or like a Ty Cobb. I bet you Ty Cobb thought this, or did think like I did. I don't think there's a player that I ever saw or ever knew that asked the question as you asked it. Wouldn't say, yeah, I should have been better. If I had to do it over, I know I'd have been better. You don't realize, till after you get out of this damn game, how great some of the guys were, like a Dominic, and like a Pesky, and like a Dorr.
Ruth, I was with him 4 or 5 times on a milk fund drive up in Boston, 1940 or something. But he was a big, gargantuous, fun-loving, you know, and he was the greatest admired athlete in our history, American history. And so everything, hell, the world was his toy. And he was a very nice old, nothing big shot about him at all. Hornsby's the guy that surprised me. Hornsby was supposed to be just as aggravating as Ty Cobb, and 2 of the greatest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hitters of all time. And he couldn't have been nicer to me. We'd have good competition. Oh, shucks, he was a heck of a nice guy to me.
By the way, the only people he didn't like, pitchers.
Yeah, I can see. No, I don't think he didn't like them. I think he analyzed them, and he knew exactly what they were doing, and I think he liked them to a point.
Do you think you learned anything listening to him telling you how to hit? Could you go out there and hit right now?
Yeah, I could take a couple off the wall.
I heard in the BP that we took the other day, it was not all that impressive.
I had 5 off the wall.
It was depressing. Funding for the closed captioning of tonight's events here on Ness and Ted Williams, a celebration of an American hero, is provided by the Yawkey Foundations. And this has been quite a night so far here on Ness, and we're just getting started. Tom Caron down on the Diamond Club. A lot of the guys getting ready to go out on the field, but TC joins us now with Johnny Pesky.
Thanks very much. Johnny Pesky with us now. Johnny, in these 17 days since Ted passed away, you've been asked a lot about what he meant to you, what he meant to baseball, what he meant to the Red Sox. Can you put it all in perspective on a night like this?
I'll put it to you as quickly as I can, Tom. Of course, you know how we all felt about him. He's the greatest player, greatest hitter that ever lived. He got Yastrzemski and Williams. The fans of New England saw 2 of the greatest players that ever played the game. You can talk about Mays and Aaron and all those guys, but Ted was our guy, and Yaz was our guy, and it's just sad that we lost him, and I know he's at peace now because he was suffering.
You were so close to him to the end. You saw how sick he was over time, and you've told me this before, but there was something about Ted Williams, you thought he'd overcome it. He would always beat the odds.
Well, you know, he was so strong. When we went down last fall to see him, Dominic and Dick Flavin and I went down to see him, and we spent 3 days with him. And boy, he was pretty good. There was nothing wrong with his memory, I know that. We had supper with him, we had breakfast with him, breakfast, supper, and then 3 days, and I guess, but we talked about things when he was young, and who he pitched against, who he could hit, who didn't hit against, and stuff like that. And we had a great time with him. And then when this happened, Tom, I was a basket case. It really wasn't. I never dreamed anything like this would happen to him. I thought, you know, when we were there last fall, he looked like he was, you know, he was getting stronger. And then the next thing I know, we saw him in February at the museum, and he didn't look all that bad either, I didn't think. But Dom kept calling him a lot. And Dom would check with us. I'd call Dominic, and he'd tell me what was going on. But when this all happened, well, the phones were ringing, and people were all around, and finally did get a chance to talk to Dom. And then Dom said that he talked to him the day before. And he said, Johnny, I could hardly hear him, hear his voice. And he said, I think the end's in sight. And he died the next day.
To have a night like tonight, to be with former players and friends from the game, friends of there, what's it mean to you? What's it mean to all of you here tonight?
Well, it means a great deal to us, Tom, for the simple reason it's a tribute. It's not a celebration, it's a tribute. And that's the way we're looking at it, because this fella, the great one, as we call him, the great Ted Williams, he was so good to all of us, especially when we were players. And He worried about us, talked to us. We ate dinner together a lot of times, and he was just great. And it was like a we were like a family to him. And there was Dom, Bobby, and me, and Ted, and we all came from the West Coast too. And we latched on to one another. And of course, I was the last of the four, and I hung onto their coattails, and they took me with them everywhere they ever went. And I always ate good in those years too.
It was a great ride. Johnny, thank you for joining us. Enjoy tonight.
All right, Tom, thank you.
That's Johnny Pesky, part of the tribute that we are closing in on. Let's go back to our studio.
Thanks, Tom. Johnny Pesky calling Ted Williams one of the great ones. I got to say, I think Johnny Pesky also one of the great ones, a Red Sox legend.
It is. It's nice to see him down on the field again, you know, helping hit fungos, just talking to guys. He brings a calming to the game, you know, to be able to, you know, run things by him. I know the players, you know, especially the hitters in the infielders talk to him a lot.
He was so close with Ted Williams, and as he mentioned, he was a basket case when all this happened because he was so close. Like, as he mentioned, it's like family.
It's like he lost his brother. It doesn't matter if you think, you know, you're 80-something years old and, oh, he led a full life. People don't think like that.
Right.
It doesn't matter how old you are when you pass. You passed. And he feels it.
It's going to be a special night for everybody, I think Johnny Pesky included. Now, we talk about the career of Ted Williams. We talk about all of the home runs, hitting 400. But a lot of people always want to get back to that final at-bat, and that will be included right now as we go back to Remembering the Kid.
In spring training of 1954, Ted Williams broke his collarbone and had to have a pin put in to stabilize it. The injury kept him out of the lineup for several weeks, but in his first game back, the splinter hit 2 home runs, a double and 4 singles, and a doubleheader with Detroit, an incredible return. For the next several years, Williams continued to enjoy success at the plate, and in 1957, he was named Outstanding Male Athlete of the Year by Sporting News.
I was a smarter hitter, and I hit a ton of balls right on the nose, you know, line drives and hard through the infield. And I hit the ball that year, oh, gee, I hit the ball consistently good all year.
He certainly was, with a batting average of .388, the highest in either league since his own .406, and at the age of 39. The following year, in a hitting duel with fellow Red Sox Pete Reynolds, Ted marked another one in the history books, becoming the oldest batting champ in Major League Baseball, finishing the year at .328.
We had heard a story from Tommy Lasorda about how Ted and him were spending an evening in a hotel room, and Ted was talking about how much he liked Frank Sinatra. For some reason, that was how the conversation went. Ted certainly didn't always talk about baseball. And Lasorda said, how about if I get him on the phone right now? And they talked for a while, and when Ted got off the phone, he said, I can't believe I talked to Frank Sinatra. And Lasorda said to Frank, well, how was that? And he said, I just can't believe I talked to Ted Williams.
On September 28, 1960, before a crowd of over 10,000 Fenway fans, the Kid, now 20 years later, took his place at the plate one last time, facing Jack Fisher of the Baltimore Orioles.
Everybody quiet now here at Fenway Park after they gave him a standing ovation of 2 minutes, knowing that this is probably his last time at bat. 1 out, nobody on, last of the 8th inning. Jack Fisher into his windup. Here's the pitch. Williams swings, and there's a long drive to deep right. That ball is going, and it is gone. A home run for Ted Williams in his last time at bat in the Major League.
I remember the last time Williams was at bat. He hit 2 home runs. The first one, the umpire called foul. Went out of the ballpark fair, but it curved out in the foul territory. The umpire never thought of judging where that pitch was going when it left the ballpark, which was the fence or the wall barrier. So in other words, the theory, Williams had 2 home runs the last time.
The ball that he hit was more on a line, and we're, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm standing there in the bullpen, I'm watching this ball, and I'm thinking about, oh my God, what a way to go out.
I thought a little bit about tipping my hat because I knew I wasn't going to play anymore. And I got somewhere around second and third, and gee, I said, I can't. I never did. But I thought about it a little bit going around the bases. I thought about it.
And despite criticism that followed, Williams had decided it fitting to go out at home in the company of the fans that for so long had cheered on one of Fenway's finest.
That irritates me about as much as anything, in my career.
Yeah.
Because there was no question. I went to him, I said, this is it, it's the last, I'm not going to New York. There's no question about that.
Red Sox announcer Curt Gowdy got the tip-off of Williams' choice to retire and to forego the final series in New York just moments before the game. And when Ted hit that last ball out of the park, he revealed to the fans that they were witnessing the Splendid Splinter's final feat.
I went into the clubhouse that day. I was late. And Johnny Orlando got me aside and said, this is the kid's last game. I said, what do you mean? We got another series left in New York. I said, well, he's got a chest cold, and he's talked to Mr. Yaki and Cronin, and they've given him permission to go ahead and leave. This will be his last game. Not only his last home game, but his last game ever. I knew that. Nobody else did.
Yeah.
Maybe they knew it upstairs.
Yeah.
You talked to Yaki, hadn't you, like that? And
No, I never talked to him about that being the last.
Yeah.
No.
And I know you told Johnny.
Johnny, and certainly the impression at the clubhouse was that I told him that I wasn't going to New York.
Well, Johnny told me, he said, don't breathe it because you're the only one that knows it. So when you came up that last time at bat and you hit the soaring home run to the right field and as you rounded first, I said, and Ted Williams has hit a home run in his last time at bat in the major league. So everybody said, well, how did I know? You had another series to go. And they still brought that up to me 10 years later.
No kidding.
And I finally told them, well, Johnny Orlando told me in the clubhouse.
It's like he didn't want to look up there. He ended up running by somebody and not even slapping their hand. He wanted to keep his head down. I don't know, because of emotion, because he knew of his last at-bat, and he didn't want anybody to see his face.
He talked about as he was rounding the bases, thinking, what should I do? Should I tip my cap? I've never done it. Should I do it? And, he just decided to go out the way he played his entire career, which was, I think, the way to do it.
Yeah, he never showed anybody up. He always hustled. He never watched any home run. He was definitely a class act.
And that final at-bat, Curt Gowdy, I think, made it even more special because he's a legendary broadcaster.
I love listening to him.
Oh, no question. And then he was so close with Ted Williams, and to announce after he hit the home run, in his final at-bat to hit a home run. You just said, just hearing it again, it gives you the goosebumps.
It does. It really does. He had a great voice for baseball, and the way he announced that, like he said, he's the only one that knew. Ted knew, he knew, and a couple of front office people. Clubhouse.
1959, Jim. Ted Williams hit 254, and you're thinking the end is over. The end is here. His career is over. What does he do? He goes to Tom Yawkey and he says, "I want you to dock me 30% of my salary. I had a bad year." And Yawkey's like, "I don't want to do that." Ted Williams says, "No, I'm not going to play again unless you knock my salary down 30%. That's exactly what he did. He comes back the next year, and in 1960, he hits 316. So
made him hungry again.
How many players today would go in and talk to the owner and say, "I'm not getting it done. Dock my salary"?
Not many. I remember Mark McGuire did do that.
He did? Really?
Yeah, when he had an off year and he took his 20% pay cut, had no beef with it, and he batted just barely over 200.
I wonder if players of today, not to make this a political, but can they learn something from the players of the past? Not just what they do on the field, but in just the way they carry themselves.
I think they should learn about the tradition of the game and respecting the game and always hustling and always showing the kid in the crowd what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to dog it around the bases. You're not supposed to half, I can't say that word, half bake it after a pop-up or not hustle. And always show class. And I think that's what the players
of today
should do.
You ready for some kind of event tonight here on Nesson? All right, they're just about ready to get it started out at Fenway Park. Thanks for watching, everybody. And now stand by for one of the truly special nights in Red Sox history. Let's go upstairs to Don Orsillo.
Thanks a lot, Bob. As you can see, the procession has begun here at Fenway Park. Dominic DiMaggio and Johnny Pesky out of the gate first. Of course, Dom, the brother of Joe, is a member of the Red Sox 40 through 42, again in 46 through 53. And more of the procession. Sam Mealy and Frank Malzone making their way down towards the seats. Mealy, member of the Red Sox 47 through 49, 54 and 55. And Walt Tropo, Charlie Wagner. The teammates of Ted's make their way towards the seats. Tropo, member of the Red Sox 49 through 52. Bob Montgomery, Dave Boo Ferris. most of them making their way down and across to the seats on the first base side. And all will be lined up either on the first base side or on the third base side. Jerry Remy and Mike Andrews making their way in. A couple of former second basemen for the Red Sox. Tiante is here tonight along with Jim Longboard. Of course, Longboard with the Red Sox from 65 through 71, and there's the captain, Carl Yastrzemski, returning to Fenway Park. Red Sox with a couple of fine managers here tonight. Not only the one that is employed this season, but Morgan Magic here tonight. Joe Morgan returning to Fenway Park as well. Walpole Joe is here. And while there are many former members of the Red Sox, certainly many present members of the Red Sox here tonight, and that includes the coaching staff. Bob Kipper along with Tony Cloninger here for tonight's festivities. Omar Garcia-Parra, Tim Wakefield, and Lou Merlone also here tonight on their off day as part of this tribute. Dave O'Hara, a former longtime AP writer, as well as official scorer at Fenway Park, and of course the interim general manager in Mike Port. Here's John Glenn and Bud Selig make their way onto the Fenway Park surface. And the ownership of the Boston Red Sox represented tonight. Large reason that this tribute is taking place tonight at Fenway Park. John Henry and Tom Werner and former Senator George Mitchell and Larry Lucchino, the CEO and president of the Red Sox. Bear Menino on hand tonight, and of course joined by the great former voice of the Boston Red Sox, Curt Gatti. There's another terrific former voice in Ned Martin, along with the governor, Jane Swift. And the Red Sox make sure to mention that this is not a memorial service, certainly a celebration and a tribute. A celebration of an American hero here tonight at Fenway Park. Longtime general manager Lou Gorman, joined by another former voice of the Red Sox and Ken Coleman. The past administration is on hand as well. John Harrington is here, and so is Dan Duquette. Well, of course, earlier today, many of the events that took place here at Fenway Park, his fans had a chance to walk along the warning track around the outfield and had the opportunity to look at many of the photos, not only depicting Ted Williams as a player, but certainly during his service time and his contributions to the Jimmy Fund. And that's a look at some of the Devil Rays who are here tonight. Tampa Bay, of course, beginning a series here tomorrow, and many of them had asked to be part of this tribute here tonight, and their coaching staff is here along with their CEO Vince Nemoli, who is also here tonight with the Devil Rays. So there are many former players, present players, players who played with Ted, and it sounds as if heading into tonight's action we'll be hearing not only about Ted and his terrific numbers, but his service time and his contribution to the Jimmy Fund as well. And you'd be hard-pressed to find an event like this that would bring this kind of people here to the ballpark, from all different facets of life. And this is going to be an incredible event here tonight at Fenway Park, an historic event, to say the least. Bud Selig is on hand here tonight. John Glenn really talking much about his wingman, Ted Williams. We are very close to the beginning of our ceremony tonight, as Peter Gammons and Sean McDonough make their way to home plate. We'll now send it down to field level to Sean McDonough and Peter Gammons.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fenway Park. I'm Sean McDonough. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this ongoing celebration of the life of an American hero, the great Ted Williams. Earlier today, more than 10,000 people filed through our historic ballpark to pay their respects to the legendary number 9. Tonight, we'll focus on the aspects of Ted Williams' life that made him an American icon and that have inspired so many to come from so far to bring honor and dignity to his good name. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by my good friend and co-master of ceremonies, the noted baseball expert and analyst, Peter Gammons.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you all for coming. We know that each one of you wants to honor Ted in your own way, and we hope that we can provide that opportunity. It's a measure of a public figure in how he treats private acquaintances. And anyone who has grown up around this ballpark knows that few were better to people, little people, common people, than Ted Williams. Whether it was Helen Robinson on the switchboard, or the Orlandos in the clubhouses, or Jack Fadden in the trainer's room, Ted was great to all those people that you never saw. My favorite postcard of Ted came from an interview I did about an hour and a half in Florida in 1991 for ESPN. It was to honor the 50th anniversary of his hitting .406. And when we were done, he said, "I've got to leave." And then he called me out to the kitchen where he had prepared 2 pitchers of iced tea, a couple of plates of crackers and cheese and nachos. I said, "Ted Williams fixing nachos?" He looked at me and he said, "You know what? That crew of yours, all those guys putting up all those cameras and pulling them all down, they really worked hard today." And he started to go out the door and he turned around to me and he said, "And you know what else? It's got to be really tough working with you, Bush." And out the door he went. Sean.
Thank you, Peter. Friends, tonight we begin our celebration as we would begin a ball game. We ask now that you please rise for our national anthem. One of the keys of Ted Williams' life was his patriotism and his pride in being a Marine. So tonight, we are pleased to welcome a member of the United States Marines, Massachusetts State Trooper Dan Clark.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free
after 9. And when he walks to the diamond, the ballpark comes alive. Grabs a bat and strolls to the plate. Then with one mighty blow, sends a hush running through the crowd. Man, he puts on quite a show. His perfect swing makes the pitcher's fear. To everyone, it's very clear. The kid's a natural. You can tell he was born to play this game. The kid's a natural. He gives a little hometown a big proud name. Someday they'll put his glove away, hang his picture in the small town hall of fame, and proclaim the kid's a natural. He gives a little hometown a big proud name, a natural. You can tell he was born to play this game. The kid's a natural. He gives a little hometown a big proud name.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming two of the men who have brought new leadership, energy, and vision to Red Sox baseball. The principal owner of the Boston Red Sox, Mr. John W. Henry. And the chairman of the Red Sox, Tom Werner.
Thanks, Sean. My role tonight here is simple. I'm here to welcome you and thank all of you tonight who've come from so far, to welcome you tonight to a celebration of the life of Theodore Samuel Williams. The celebration began at 9 o'clock this morning as more than 12,000 fans were welcomed to Fenway to honor Ted Williams on the field. Tonight, all of us have gathered here to pay tribute to an American hero. We will have an evening in store for you that you will not forget. We welcome the leaders of our community, and in particular, we welcome the great mayor of Boston, Mr. Thomas Menino. And thank you to all of the members of the mayor's staff who made tonight possible. We also want to welcome the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Honorable Jane Smith. Governor Swift brought a proclamation celebrating the grand accomplishments of the great Ted Williams. And we also welcome Massachusetts legislators and the Boston City Council. We want to thank Commissioner Bud Selig and Major League President Bob Dupay, who came here tonight to honor the memory of Ted Williams. We also welcome and invite to step forward the leaders of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, the Chairman of the Hall of Fame, Jane Forbes Clark, and President Dale Petrosky, who have lent us the Ted Williams Hall of Fame plaque, which they will now unveil. Thank you. So now, please join us in celebrating the life of Ted Williams, who for so many years in left field here at Fenway Park gave us greatness. Thank you. Tom?
On behalf of the entire Red Sox organization, on this day, when we honor the greatest hitter who ever lived, we also want to say thanks to you, the Boston Red Sox fans, the greatest fans in professional sports. Tonight, we are delighted to announce permanent additions to our home, beloved Fenway Park, to forever honor the great Ted Williams. First, we will rename the 600 Club the 406 Club. And we will adorn it with Ted Williams memorabilia and artifacts while making sure that all fans get to enjoy that facility. And tonight, we also announce that we will establish in left field a bronze plaque in Ted's honor. It will read, Theodore Samuel Williams, August 30th, 1918, July 5th, 2002. The Kid, the Splendid Splinter, Teddy Ballgame. He was the greatest Red Sox player of them all. From his debut in 1939 until his retirement in 1960, Ted Williams realized his dream. He wanted to be known as the greatest hitter who ever lived, and he was. No matter the score, people would stay just to see him hit once more. His on-base percentage, .483, was the highest in history. And when he retired, his 521 home runs were exceeded only by Babe Ruth's 714 and his teammate Jimmy Fox's 534. He won 2 Triple Crowns and 2 American League Most Valuable Player awards, and no one has hit 400 since he hit 406 in 1941. In the midst of his career, he sacrificed 5 prime seasons to serve his country in World War II in Korea, where he was a decorated Marine fighter pilot. And he gave back to his community, tirelessly raising funds and lifting spirits for the doctors and the children of the Jimmy Fund. The greatest hitter who ever lived, a true patriot, and a pioneer in sports philanthropy. Ted Williams, an American hero, respectfully dedicated by the Boston Red Sox, July 22nd, 2002. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Tom. I think I speak on behalf of all Red Sox fans when I say thank you to these gentlemen, the other members of the new ownership and management team. Already we've seen and benefited from their hard work, results, and sensitivity. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce a man who has taken perhaps the most famous poem in baseball and modified it in honor of his friend, a man he idolized. Please welcome noted humorist, longtime Boston television personality, Dick Flavin, as he performs Teddy at the Bat.
Thank you very much, Sean. Last fall, I got to take the road trip of a lifetime when I drove from Boston to Florida with Johnny Pesky and Dominic DiMaggio and spent 3 days visiting with Ted Williams. The relationship that those people have fostered over more than 60 years is an extraordinary thing. And they all seemed to sense that even though Dom would get back to see Ted quite often over the winter and would talk to him virtually every day on the telephone to tell him how the Red Sox were doing, that this would be the last time the three of them would be together again. And from time to time throughout that visit, a big grin would creep across Ted's face, and he would look at the two of them and say, "Gee, it's great to see you guys." Well, I thought that I should do something to justify my own presence among this august group. So I modified a grand old baseball poem to make it about the Red Sox in those glorious days when Dominic DiMaggio batted leadoff, and Johnny Pesky batted second, and Ted Williams batted third. The first time I recited this was before an audience of 3 in Ted's living room. Dom, Johnny, and Ted. And now, with your forbearance, I recite it as a tribute to Ted Williams. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Red Sox 9 that day. The score stood 4-2 with but 1 inning left to play. So when Stevens died at first and Tebbets did the same, a pallor wreathed the features of the patrons of that game. A straggling few got up to go, leaving there the rest with the hope that swings eternal within the human breast. For they thought, if only Teddy could get a whack at that, they'd put even money now with Teddy at the bat. But Dom preceded Teddy, and Pesky was on deck, and the first of them was in a slump, the other was a wreck. So on that stricken multitude a death-like silence sat, for there seemed but little chance of Teddy's getting to the bat. But Dom let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Pesky, of all people, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and they saw what had occurred, there was Johnny safe on second and Dominic on third. Then from that gladdened multitude went up a joyous yell. It rumbled in the mountains and rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and rebounded on the flat. For Teddy Ballgame was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Teddy's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Teddy's bearing and a smile on Teddy's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. I'm making that part up. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Teddy at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded as he wiped them on his shirt. Then, when the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Teddy's eye. A sneer curled Teddy's lip. And then, the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Teddy stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman the ball unheeded sped. "That ain't my style," said Teddy. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches black with people went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on the stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" someone shouted on the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Teddy raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Teddy's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult and bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more, the spheroid flew, and Teddy still ignored it. And the umpire said, strike two. Fraud, cried the maddened thousands, and the echo answered, fraud, 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 fraud. But one scornful look from Teddy, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Teddy wouldn't let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Teddy's lips. His teeth are clenched with hate. He pounds with cruel vengeance, his back upon the plate. And now, the pitcher holds the ball. And now, he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Teddy's blow. Oh, somewhere in this land of ours, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, ha, ha, ha. And somewhere children shout. And they're going wild at Fenway Park, 'cause Teddy hit one out.
Well, we heard about the great table setters in front of Ted Williams, and they're here with us tonight. The great Dominic DiMaggio, Johnny Pesky, joined by arguably the greatest broadcaster ever, Curt Dowdy.
Thank you, Peter. You want me to sit there? Yeah.
I thought you gentlemen would get a kick out of something I read, a great piece by John Underwood in Sports Illustrated about going fishing with Ted. And he said there are 4 things to remember when fishing with a kid. He's a perfectionist. He's better than you are. He's the consummate needler, and he is in charge. Well, Tom, in the late 80s, there was a night for Ted here in Boston, and your brother Joe was at it. And since it was the first time that they had been together in public for about 10 or 15 years, I asked if I could do something for Sports Illustrated on the two of them. And Joe gracefully said, I'm sorry, I don't talk to Sports Illustrated. Ted looked at him and said, this is the Jimmy Fund. This is my town, this is my event, and you're talking to him. And he did. Now, there's been a lot written about the rivalry between Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Peter, the rivalry was very evenly divided. When Ted first came up in 1939 and 1940-41, he felt that Joe was the greatest ball player he had ever seen and was a little bit in awe of him. But as time went on, then Ted felt more comfortable because he felt that he achieved equality with Joe, except for the fact he always considered Joe the greatest all-around baseball player he'd ever seen. And Joe, in turn, always said that Ted was the greatest hitter he'd ever seen.
That's wonderful. Your teammate and number 1 up on the wall, Bobby Doerr, wanted to be here. He could not be. And Bobby always tell me the story that when Ted would start going on a diatribe about the angle of the uppercut that you had to have to hit a baseball, that he always used to say to Bobby, you know what, you're so dumb, you don't understand it. Well, what was it like being in that clubhouse every day, talking hitting with that man?
Peter, you had to be there to believe the things that went on. So help me. The thing with Teddy, as Dom pointed out, he was, if anybody knew anything about hitting, it was Williams. Especially if you had no power. I didn't have any power, but I was a banjo hitter is what they called me. But I did a lot of banjoing, I guess. But I had some success. But when Williams was in our lineup, we'd always talked about who was pitching. If the pitcher did this or he did that, we always watched the pitcher. And I can still, to this day, remember what he said. Get a ball you can hit, get a good place in the box, and take a good swing. And when you get your pitch, hit it and hit it hard.
Thank you, John. Kurt, for years, you brought us what Ted did. You brought it lyrically. But you are credited with saying that Ted Williams was the greatest hitter who ever lived. He was the greatest fisherman who ever lived, and I know that you would know that. And he could have been the greatest pilot who ever lived. Could you just talk about your admiration for him?
Well, I've always said that Ted Williams is the most competent man I ever met. I don't care what it was. When he went after it, he excelled at it. Why? Because he practiced, studied it, worked at it, and I never saw a guy work as hard in his craft as he did. Plus, he was, a lot of people forget that he was a perfectionist. And I never saw a perfectionist that was truly happy. Most of the time he got mad at himself. But what a competent guy he was. And I fished with him a lot of times. And I remember we got close when I came here in Boston in '51. 1 month after I was here, right here in this batting cage, he was taking batting practice and he walked out. He came over to me and he said, "I hear you're from Wyoming." I said, "That's right." "How'd you know?" He said, "Somebody told me." He said, "I hear you love to fly fish." I said, "I do." He said, "Why don't you come up to my room tomorrow and watch me tie flies?" And from then on, it was fishing that brought Ted and I very close. He was one of a kind.
Tom, I know you had a very special relationship with him. I just like to hear your words on him.
Well, Peter, I took a little time to arrange about 2 minutes of something I would like to say, and I hope you will bear with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I accepted the invitation here tonight because I wanted to help honor Ted Williams, who, among his many other attributes, and in my opinion, had to be the greatest hitter in the history of the major leagues. He was my very close friend. I will miss him, but many fond memories will help to fill the void, especially the one when Ted made a habit of talking to the scoreboard operator right out there. He would talk to him, then he would excitedly yell over to me, "Hey, dummy, Joe just got another hit." This was during my brother Joe's 56-game win-hitting streak. A generous person, Ted Williams gave willingly of his time to help individuals, especially kids, and freely allowed his name and himself to be used to benefit countless charitable institutions, large and small. Ted was also his own man, and he did do it his way. After his playing days were over, and contrary to general beliefs, he enjoyed being around people. He especially enjoyed holding court, which he often did, with groups of his friends and acquaintances, and aside from some choice words about the media early on, which were tempered somewhat in his latter years, I never once heard Ted say a mean word about anyone. His love and devotion to his country is indisputable. Serving a total of almost 5 years on 2 separate occasions, in the armed forces as a pilot in the Marine Corps during both World War II and in Korea. During the heart of a professional baseball career, which normally is short at best, and at a time when stringent one-year contracts would be considered meager as compared to today's long-term inflated contracts. I was saddened when Ted passed on, but I am considerably more saddened at the turmoil of the current controversy. I hope and pray this controversy will end as abruptly as it began, and that the family will do the right thing by honoring Ted's last wishes as to his final resting place, and may he then finally rest in peace.
And that's why he is the professor. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Three of the great neighbors in our New England community, Johnny Pesky, Dominic DiMaggio, Kurt Dowdy. Thank you. Next, we'd like to welcome two gentlemen who are synonymous with Red Sox baseball. Number 8, Hall of Famer Kari Yastrzemski, and one of the most lyrical voices of my lifetime in baseball, Ned Martin.
I don't have a mic. That means I don't have to talk.
No, you're going to talk. I've heard Ted yell at Don Mattingly, you know, you don't even know where your hands are. Tony Gwynn told me the first time he ever met Ted, and he already had 3 batting titles, Ted lectured him about his Little League bat and trying to hit the ball to left field. What was it like the first time you came to spring training and met Ted?
Well, I came to spring training in 1960, and I spent most of the spring training, which was Ted's last year. He took me aside one day, and we started talking hitting. I said, Ted, I appreciate it very much, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Was it difficult in 1961 walking out there to left field as his successor?
Yes, it was. It really was tough on me at that time. I was only 21 years old. I was replacing the greatest hitter that ever lived. I tried to be like Ted. When I first came up, I hit more up the middle, left center, right center, and I tried to hit home runs. I struggled, hit 230, 240 first half of the season. The one thing he did do, I told Mr. Yorkie, I said, I wish Ted was around. I need some extra hitting. Ted was fishing somewhere in Nova Scotia. I don't know how Mr. Yorkie got a hold of him, but the next day Ted Williams was at the ballpark to help me out.
That's tremendous. Ned, you're one person who might know this, that Ted Williams was Jack Kerouac's idol, and he used to ride the Boston and Maine into Boston, go to Fenway Park, because he said, you know something? Ted was his own man, and therefore He was so iconoclastic that he worshipped him. From what you knew of him, didn't you find him one of the most unique and iconoclastic characters you'd ever met?
Yeah, I loved him for that. I mean, he told, I will tell you about my first meeting with him in the clubhouse out in Arizona. I came up. We're joined at the hip, incidentally, Yaz and I. We do things like this all the time. But I came up, and Billy Muffet introduced me to Ted Williams in the clubhouse over there. He said, "Would you like to meet Ted?" I said, "You telling me? Yeah, I'd love to." And I went up, and he introduced me as the new announcer, and Ted looked down, kind of hooded eyes, and said, "Well, I'm gone now, but thank God I don't have to mess with you." I was part of the media, you see, and but after, it was fun, you know, and he meant it, I hope, the way it was taken, because I got to know him a lot and interviewed with him and watched a very stirring tennis match in Winter Haven between Ted Williams and Carl Yastrzemski. Who won that?
Well, I spent 25 years with Ted in spring training. We had some fiery discussions about hitting and fishing. Of course, Ted always won. But I loved playing golf and tennis against him because I always won.
And I was there, and even though you hit everything backhanded, you did win. Two of the great people in baseball history in Boston, Carl Yastrzemski, Ned Martin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
One of the great things about Ted was that he was forever contemporary. In '93, he did an interview in which he said, "Every time I watch Paul Molitor, I close my eyes and I see Joe DiMaggio." Molitor later said, "You know, if I'm lucky enough to make it to Cooperstown, I'm not sure which will be a greater thrill, being in the Hall of Fame or hearing Ted's words." One of the last times I saw Ted a couple of years ago, he said, "You know, if you want to sound intelligent for one of the few times in your life, tell your audience this, that I was not the greatest player who ever played for the Boston Red Sox. The best all-around player who ever has played for the Boston Red Sox and worn that uniform is Nomar Garciaparra." And he's joined by another great broadcaster and voice of the Red Sox for many years, Ken Coleman.
Peter, I have to tell you, this is the greatest hand I've ever gotten at Fenway Park. I think this fellow had something to do with it, and I have to say, I've never met Nomar before tonight, and I've admired him greatly because I love to watch him play and hear about him play, because I sense how much he loves the game, and I know how much he loves Ted Williams, as do I.
For a lot of us here, one of the great memories of this ballpark was the All-Star game in 1999, when all of you great players gathered around Ted. Mark McGwire told me that he called him over and he asked him, "Did you ever smell the bat burn when you foul the ball back?" And after the game, McGwire was telling the story in the National League clubhouse, and one National League pitcher said, "That's impossible. It can't happen." And I just turned to him and said, "You know, John Updike wrote, gods don't return mail. Well, the gods also speak a language that the rest of us don't understand. And that night, when he called for you, what did he say to you?
Well, actually, what he told me was, I'm sorry I missed your party last night, because I invited him to a party I had, and that's exactly what he was telling me. I mean, I think that was so special to me because I knew him on that level. It wasn't just, you know, a guy who went out there and played baseball that, you know, he gives me so many compliments, which turns my face red and everything, but he saw me as a friend and said, you know what, Nomar, sorry I missed your party yesterday, I couldn't make it, so that was pretty special to me.
The two of you developed a bond, which in these days is a little bit unusual. Could you just talk about it?
Well, like I said, the first time I remember talking to him was on the phone, and he just kept drilling me about how much, he wanted to see how much I knew about hitting. And at the time, I really don't think much about hitting. I always say to myself as a hitter that I see the ball and I try to hit it, and hopefully I hit it hard. But he made me really think about it, and I was answering all these questions, answering for 45 minutes. It was nonstop, and I'll tell you what, I felt like I was on the hot seat. I was nervous. I was stumbling over words. I was doing everything. And when I finished, you know, he was just going, well, you answered them all right. And he goes, and that's what I like to hear. And then after that, every time I would go see him, I'd go talk. There were times I'd go and I'd sit in his house and have breakfast with him. And just looking at his house, looking at the pictures in his house, and just seeing the history. I mean, you can see some of the pictures, what a great man he was. I got to see that side of him. And I think that was more special to me than anything because, like I said, to be able to say, you know, he's the greatest hitter ever lived, but to be able to say he's my friend meant even more.
Ken, I know you did a lot of events with him and you knew him very well. Was he not one of the most fun people that you ever met?
No question. He was just a delightful guy to be with. And I have to tell you something, and I wonder how many other people in this audience tonight saw him pitch in the big leagues. Because on August 24th, 1940, he pitched 3 innings against the Detroit Tigers. The Red Sox were losing 12-1. He had pitched in high school as well as playing the outfield. And Joe Cronin said, okay, go get him. And he went in and he pitched pretty darn good. And well, he was a wonderful man to be with.
Now, Nomar, is there anything when you watch him and when you've talked to him that you've taken away as a player that has taught you something?
Well, I think after talking to him all the time, and he really just made me think more about, you know, what hit and what to expect, and just how to handle things as well. Like I said, you know, not only was he talking about the finer points of hitting, which he always loved to talk about. I think anybody who knew him and everything would say that, but just how to handle things as a whole as well. And he really cared about that. And you know, when he spoke, I hung on every word. You really do. You listen to every single thing he says, and you remember it.
You know, Peter, if I may, when Johnny Pesky was working with Ned and me, and Ted was managing in Washington, I'd go out to the ballpark with Johnny about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Washington just to spend some time with Ted to visit. And I'm telling you, he knew everything about everybody, it seemed, when it came to the game. It was just exciting to know how intelligent a man he was. In fact, the late Mo Berg, the man who graduated from Princeton and was a spy for our country in World War II, once told me that Ted Williams was one of the most intelligent men he ever knew.
Ken Coleman, Nomar Garciaparra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nomar.
We have spent our time talking about Ted Williams, the ball player, and with good reason. Now we move to the next aspect of his heroism, maybe the one that was most important to him and our nation, the concept of duty and of sacrifice.
Oh, it was muddy and it was lousy looking weather. And all I just keep saying, God, why the hell am I here? But the experience that I had in Korea, I wouldn't trade ever. I met the greatest bunch of men that I have ever met in my life. And one was John Glenn.
Probably half the missions that Ted flew in Korea, he flew as my wingman. And he was very, very good.
I made a little bit of a boo-boo that could have been, oh boy, could it have been bad.
Ted got hit and had fire coming out from around the engine, and usually blew the tail off. The whole thing would blow.
But in this particular case, there was no fire in the cockpit. And I dreaded to think I was going to have to bail out of a plane, and I really probably should have bailed out. But anyway, belly landed. Got on the mat, no wheels, but boy, I was screeching to a stop.
That was a very close call. That's about as close as you can come and still make it.
I didn't get hurt, but it was pretty hairy, I'll tell you that.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect back on the life of Ted Williams, we realize that he had no greater point of personal pride than in his service to our country. He was a Navy pilot in World War II and a Marine fighter pilot in Korea. I'd now like to have you welcome two distinguished Americans who can enlighten us about this perspective of Ted Williams. One was his opponent on the field, but a comrade in arms in Korea who became and remained a lifelong friend. For more than 30 years, he has been a very popular broadcaster for the San Diego Padres. And for that long and longer, Ted would visit him, along with Ted's lifelong friend, Bob Breitbard, in his native San Diego. And also with us tonight, a man who flew missions in Korea and later flew missions where no American had ever gone before into outer space. Then he continued to serve our country with great distinction as a senator from the state of Ohio. Please join me in welcoming former Yankee second baseman Jerry Coleman and Senator John Glenn. Gentlemen, thank you. Welcome. We're proud and honored to have you here on this special night and have you in our great city. And Senator, I know you've come to share your thoughts about your friend and the man you called the best wingman you ever had, Ted Williams.
Yeah, I think it's very appropriate, tonight's remembrance of Ted as one of baseball's all-time greats is here in Fenway Park, where Ted played his entire 19-year Major League career. The greatest hitter ever, the Sport Page headline read, and the records that were recited just a few moments ago certainly bear that out. Ted wanted to do his very best in whatever he tried, and just saying his name means the best in baseball, setting records that have never been equaled, let alone surpassed. But for me, Ted also stood for excellence in a setting far removed from baseball, and for which he is less well known to most Americans. He was also Captain Ted Williams, a Marine Corps jet fighter pilot, trained at the end of World War II, but recalled to active duty, combat duty, in the Korean War. About half the missions he flew in Korea were as my wingman, so I got to know Ted very, very well, and the bonds of shared combat do indeed run deep. Baseball excellence may be what Ted will be remembered for by most people, but his dedication to another kind of excellence as a Marine jet fighter pilot will be my greatest memory of him. He never held back. He'd press the attack in trying to accomplish our mission during low-level, close air support runs against enemy positions closest to our own troops, or making bomb, rocket, or strafing attacks on positions deep into North Korea, and almost always facing heavy anti-aircraft fire. Ted's plane was hit on a couple of missions. On one flight, he was pressing an attack on a fortified position when a secondary explosion from a bunker on the ground blew debris, dirt, and rocks into the air. A good-sized rock, about 8 inches across, went through Ted's right wingtip tank, fuel tank, leaving a gaping hole. Fortunately, the tank was empty, and he was able to fly home with no problem. That's getting pretty low on the attack. He took some kidding after that incident, which all went along the lines of sort of, hey, look, Ted, other guys go out and get holes in their airplanes from anti-aircraft fire, but not you. No, you got to be different. You got to get hit by rocks, of all things. He took it all, in fact, all kidding, in stride and good humor, and gave as good as he got. On another mission, Ted was just plain lucky to come back. His plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire, which set off a fire around the jet engine, which you've already seen pictures of back here on the screen. It was followed by, usually that was followed by an explosion that would blow the tail off the airplane where that had happened before. His radio and hydraulic systems were knocked out. He was trailing smoke and fire and should have ejected, should have bailed out. But he elected to try to land. The landing gear would not come down, so he landed, as you saw, with no wheels, sliding up the runway on the belly of the airplane, jumped out and watched it burn. Lucky, very, very lucky. Ted was an excellent combat pilot in every sense of the word. What would his baseball records have been if he had not been recalled to active duty? Who knows? But I never heard Ted complain about that, not once, not a word. Another and completely different side of Ted was his interest in children, which you of Boston certainly know from his longtime major support for the Children's Jimmy Fund. Ted and I once spent a week together in Japan on R&R, rest and recreation, a week of stand down from flying. Even in 1953, the Japanese were avid baseball fans, and many were very familiar with Ted and his records. The Japanese media had noted Ted's R&R visit to Japan, so he was recognized quite often. When you're as tall as he was in the city, in the land of the Japanese, it's not hard to be recognized, I might add. In Kyoto, a small group of children gathered as we stopped to look at something or other. They were looking at Ted and chattering to each other, not quite sure whether he really was who they thought he was. They spoke no English, and we spoke no Japanese. Finally, one brave little kid stepped out, took a hitting stance, swung an imaginary bat, and pointed questioningly to Ted. Ted laughed and nodded yes. He was who they thought he was. The boy hitter swung again, but this time Ted scowled at him, went over to where the boy was standing, put him in a batting position, and proceeded to correct his form. He made this little kid stand with his feet farther apart, more bend at the waist, head more lined up with an imaginary pitcher, and arms farther back to start the swing. Leaving the boy in that stance, Ted stepped back several paces, took a pitching position, and threw an imaginary baseball toward the boy, who swung with all his might. Ted ducked, let out a whooshing, whooping big yell, swung around 180 degrees as though that non-existent baseball was headed for the center field bleachers. The kids were jumping up and down. No one was more surprised than the batter, and I'm sure he was an instant hero. But Ted got a bigger kick out of that than the kids did. As to spoken language, not a word was understood in either direction, but it was not necessary. Ted and I kept in touch and visited through the years, particularly the last few years when his medical problems were so serious. And nothing gave him more pleasure than talking in that inimitable booming voice of his about those Marine days in Korea. And he still remembered those kids in Kyoto. Following his passing, one of the newspaper articles said that Ted was asked once about his favorite music, And without hesitation, he replied, 3 of them: Star Spangled Banner, the Marine Hymn, and Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And I can just believe that, too. I believe that's exactly the way it happened. Baseball may have lost one of its greatest, the greatest hitter ever, but our nation lost one of its most dedicated patriots, and Annie and I lost a great friend.
Thank you, Senator. Jerry, you played against Ted when you were with the Yankees. A lot of the senior fans here tonight remember your 3-run hit in the last game of 1949 that broke some hearts around here. Ted was your good friend. Share with us what you think about when you think about Ted.
Well, I've got a baseball story I'd like to tell very quickly, and also one about Korea. Eddie Dyer, I believe, the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals in 1946, came up with a unique shift as the pitcher came set and all the players in the infield ran out to different positions. Second baseman was out in short right field. So when I got into the big leagues in 1949, that's where I played, in short right field. I stood out there for 2 years. Nothing happened. Never hit me a ball. I finally went to Casey Stengel. He didn't speak very good English, I might add. I said, Casey, I'm out here. Why don't you get me in where I can handle ground balls better? He said, come on in. The next at-bat, he hit one on the spot that I'd left for 2 years. That was Ted Williams. The other side of the story, you've seen the plane crash, you've seen the fire. I happened to be on that mission in North Korea, as was most of the Marine Air at that time. And suddenly you heard this, I've got a mayday, I've got a mayday. And then you listen. And here comes another young pilot. I've got you, I've got you. You're burning. I'll take you to Kimpo. And so off they go. And whether you realize it or not, that's your brother. That's you when you listen. And suddenly the silence, and nothing after that. Finally, the next morning, we found out that that was Ted Williams, with an angel on his shoulder, who survived something that could have blown and destroyed his life and could have ended his baseball career. He was a wonderful, wonderful human being. No matter who you were, where you were, if you went up to Ted, if you were the other team and said, hey, I can't handle the slider, come here. And he'd spend a half hour with you, even though you might beat him that day. But Ted, we know, was the greatest hitter that ever lived. There are more stories you can talk about this. But more importantly, he was a great patriot. He was an even greater American. And his greatest pride was being a naval aviator in the United States Marine Corps. God bless him.
Thank you, Jerry. You two are both great Americans as well, great military men. We thank you so much for being with us here tonight. John Glenn and Jerry Coleman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Jerry. Ladies and gentlemen, as many of you remember, when Ted Williams was inducted at Cooperstown, he used that platform to show his trademark character and to call for changes regarding who should be eligible to be enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. It truly helped change the face of baseball.
Because ball players are not born great. They're not born hitters or pitchers or managers, and luck isn't the key factor. No one has come up for a substitute for hard work. I've never met a great baseball player who didn't have to work harder at learning to play baseball than anything else he ever did. To me, it was the greatest fun I ever had, which probably explains why today I feel both humility and pride, because God let me play the game and to learn to be good at it. Proud because I spent most of my life in the company of so many wonderful people. There are plaques dedicated to baseball men of all generations, and I'm privileged to join them. Baseball gives every American boy a chance to excel, not just to be as good as someone else, but to be better than someone else.
This is the nature of man and the name of the game. And I've always been a very lucky guy to have worn a baseball uniform, to have struck out or to hit a tape measure home run. And I hope that someday the names of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson in some way can be added as a symbol of the great Negro players that are not here only because they were not given a chance. Now, I know Casey Sting will feel the same way, and I'm awfully glad to be with him on his big day. I also know I'll lose a dear friend if I don't stop talking, as I know I'm eating into his time. And that is unforgivable. So in closing, I'm grateful, and I know how lucky I was to have been born in America and had a chance to play the game I love, the greatest game of them all, baseball.
Ted Williams called for change in that speech, and change came. Here to reflect on Ted's effect on baseball history, we welcome a teammate who pitched a no-hitter for the Red Sox during an outstanding major league career and who benefited from Ted's character and leadership. Joining him, we welcome the creator of the series Baseball, the legendary historian and filmmaker, Mr. Ken Burns and Earl Wilson. They love you, Earl. Ken, I would venture a guess that you probably watched more film about baseball than anybody who's alive today, and so much of that included Ted Williams. Provide for us, if you can, a mini documentary without the pictures accompanying you.
I'll try not to make it 9 parts. I'm deeply honored to have been invited to say a few words at this occasion to celebrate the monumental achievements of Ted Williams' life and career and his art. It is especially fitting that we do so today in one of the great cathedrals of our national pastime, Fenway Park, with its right field bullpen area that in earlier days and decades was called Williamsburg, after the man who deposited so many well-intentioned pitches into its precincts. First, let me extend my deepest sympathy to the Williams family for their loss and to Ted's many friends who will no longer have in their lives his singular personality, gruff, demanding, inscrutable, to be sure, but also honest, dedicated, loyal, and fiercely brilliant. But let me remind the rest of us that in many ways we have lost nothing, that Ted Williams is a true god of baseball, whose immortal acts will enliven our posterity and this game, the greatest ever invented, long after most of us have passed quietly from the scene. I am grateful also to the Boston Red Sox, in my opinion, the greatest team in baseball, for asking me to... for asking me to participate in this event this evening and for filling my life with so many extraordinary emotions. You know, in many ways, the history of this storied franchise has been hijacked by those who would tell us that our history is only about loss, that our history is only the story of Babe Ruth, Bucky Dent, and Buckner's wobbly wickets, when in fact the history of our club, and that's what it is, our club, our Commonwealth, is more about the story of Cy Young and Carl Yastrzemski, Rico Petrocelli and Pedro Martinez, Nomar Garcia-Parra, Tris Speaker and Joe Cronin, Carlton Fisk and Fred Lynn, Jim Lomborg and Jim Rice, Bill Lee, Luis Tiant and Smokey Joe Wood, Dom and Bobby and Johnny, but most of all, Ted Williams, to my mind, the greatest hitter in the history of the game. The game of ball is glorious, Walt Whitman once said, and no one is more responsible for that glory than Ted Williams. He was the game's most intellectually brilliant student, who seemed almost able to slow down time as he extracted from the game its most precious commodity, hits. He told me once with characteristic and brutal honesty that when he was a kid of 14 and 15 years of age, he used to see a shooting star, and he said he wished for two things: money, 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 and to be the best hitter that ever was. He got both, though it was the latter that gave him the most satisfaction and has propelled him in our eyes to the mythic stature we stand in awe of today. Ted Williams thought, talked, dreamt, and breathed hitting. He begrudged every out he made and squeezed a rubber ball ceaselessly to strengthen his grip. He refused to drink anything stronger than a milkshake for fear of dulling his skills, and made a scientific study of bats and discovered that it was speed, not weight, that made the difference. No one could throw a fastball past me, Williams once said, again with his fearless honesty. God could come down from heaven and he couldn't throw one past me. Well, I imagine there's some pretty interesting ball being played up there right now. The press had for many years a contentious relationship with Ted. His own mooniness contributed to this, as he was the first to admit, and this led many fans, as well as reporters, to miss this simple fact. Ted Williams found in this game an exquisite and transcendent joy. No one can forget the footage of the leaping, prancing, colt-like child luxuriating in his 1941 All-Star Game homer. The almost ridiculous seriousness he brought to the honing of his bats, down to what he called the joy zone. The amazing last day of the 41 season when he willed himself over 400. The impatience in the outfield, where he would sometimes stand swinging an imaginary bat, waiting distractedly for his own upcoming turn. The pride in which he struggled against the Williams shift. The mythic home run on his last at-bat. And the perfection, the absolute perfection, the poet Donald Hall has said, of his swing. Our game, as Walt Whitman also called baseball, sustains itself and us with numbers, stories, and voices. And as we summon back the almost inexpressibly wise ghosts of the past to paint again the timeless images of Ted Williams in my mind's eye and in my heart, many voices and stories and numbers come up again. I remember the way Johnny Pesky's eyes flash when he talks about Ted, and the unexpected adoration of future Hall of Famers at the wonderful 1999 All-Star Game. I remember the kindness and thoughtfulness Ted extended to my daughters, and the brusque, terrifying way he permitted me to ask him just a few questions for our films. I remember his commitment to the Jimmy Fund, reinvigorated once again this evening in his memory. I also remember the voice of Billy Crystal, who described for me his first meeting with Ted. I walk up to him, Billy said, and I said, Ted, I have some home movies of you striking out against Bobby Shantz, 1957, Yankee Stadium, second game of a doubleheader. He says, yeah, curveball, low and away. Sometimes we get caught up in our own mythologizing of sports figures and throw the word hero and heroic around without too much thinking, forgetting that doing something well in a pastime or a sport is just a talent or a gift, not real heroics, as the events of last year have so forcefully reminded us. But we still persist in calling some of our sports greats heroes. We do so tonight, in fact, and baseball is most susceptible to this understandable but misguided tendency. And yet in Ted's case, as in perhaps few others, Jackie Robinson most notably, we have to make an exception. He is a hero, for at least two reasons, I believe, that go far beyond his remarkable accomplishments on the field and help to put those accomplishments and this life we celebrate tonight into startling perspective. Theodore Samuel Williams gave up 5 years of his life during the peak of his career to serve in our nation's armed forces, to ensure that we have the kind of country that could lose itself on a warm summer evening in a game of baseball. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. Many of his fellow professional ball players, and of course millions of his fellow countrymen, Senator Glenn, did just the same. But Ted Williams did it fearlessly, fiercely, and heroically, and he did it twice, first in the Second World War and later in Korea. We can only speculate after we force ourselves to hover over his wartime bravery, his dozens of combat missions, his crash landing, his damaged hearing, his 3 medals for valor. We can only speculate what he might have done in baseball. What other numbers besides 406, 388 in 1957, 344 lifetime, 634 slugging, third in walks at 2019. What other numbers we would be talking about today? One thing is sure, though, ladies and gentlemen, Barry Bonds would not just be chasing Willie Mays, Babe Ruth, and Hank Aaron today, but Ted Williams, who might have been close to 700 had he not heard the call of his country. Finally, after his glorious career was over, Ted Williams was a hero once again. Elected to the Hall of Fame in his first nanosecond of eligibility, he could have spent the day of his induction, July 25th, 1966, talking about Ted Williams and his accomplishments. Instead, he took the time to look around and ask where all the great Negro League players were. Players Williams knew to be just as talented as his fellow members of the Hall of Fame, but who had been denied access to our so-called national pastime for decades. The man who had given up so much to protect our freedoms abroad was now asking his own country to live out the true meaning of his creed. That is being a hero, too. And only a few years later, Leroy Satchel Paige was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Ted Williams paved the way. The highest tribute I can pay this complicated man was that he was himself always. And I think I speak for all of us when I say to him, Godspeed and bat speed, Ted.
Thank you, Ken. That was terrific. I don't think we needed the pictures as a result of those beautifully crafted words. Thank you, Ken.
I'm fine.
How you doing, Earl?
Oh, I just woke up, man. What's up?
Ted reached out to you and helped baseball in America in some ways move into new times. What are your memories?
Well, in 1957, I was a member of the Boston Red Sox Farm Club, and coming down in 1959 when I was called up into the big leagues. You know, it was a tough situation because not only going to the big leagues was something that would scare a young kid, but I was going to Boston. And this was not the favorite place for an African American to be going at that particular time. But walking into the Cleveland Stadium, Ted Williams came up to me and started talking about in '57 when I had pitched against him, the pitch that I got him out on a weak ground was second base. He sent a little sinker on the outside corner. Well, hell, I didn't know I even threw a sinker at that time. But he came and he said, "You're going to be all right. You'll be good." He put his arms around me. That was just like God coming from heaven saying that I'm going to be all right. So that's the kind of guy he was. And often he talked about the injustice of not having to play against all the great players that was in the Negro League. And he's very sensitive to that.
How much did that mean to you, given that it came from a man of his stature?
It means an awful lot. Matter of fact, it's anytime someone have your future and well-being at heart is a thrill. But however, when Ted Williams says it, it's a little bit different.
The fans will remember you were a terrific hitter yourself. Did he ever pull you aside and offer you some hitting pointers?
No, well, Ted always thought pitchers were stupid. And you know, and he called Mambo Cat and I some awful dirty names, but I also told him that he was supposed to be the great Ted Williams, but I played with him when he hit 254.
Earl, Ken, thank you again so much. We appreciate you sharing your memories with us. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
And now, friends, we take a closer look at another magnificent side of Ted Williams, The man as a passionate promoter of the Jimmy Fund and a devoted cheerleader and inspiration to the children who needed his inspiration.
Can you think of anything more dreadful than a child sick with cancer? Here at the Jimmy Fund building, a highly trained staff of dedicated men and women devote their lives caring for children, while at the same time scientists work around the clock, trying to find cures and ways of preventing leukemia and all other kinds of cancer that afflict children. Do you know the one thing everyone wants more than anything else in the world? Life.
Hi, Ted. Will you autograph this baseball for me?
Okay, Slugger.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you all know there was no charity about which Ted Williams cared more than the Jimmy Fund. To illustrate it in human terms, it's my pleasure to introduce
Ted, I'm talking to
my
the ears
longtime
now.
friend,
1, 2, 3,
fellow
4,
Grottonian,
5, 6,
Dan Shaughnessy,
7, 8.
his daughter, Kate, who battled leukemia 8 years ago with direct help from Ted Williams, the Jimmy Fund, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And they're joined by the former Red Sox All-Star second baseman and director of the Jimmy Fund, Mr. Mike Andrews. Well, Dan, we actually grew up on the playing fields of Groton, Massachusetts. Does this seem kind of amazing to you that we're sitting here in the middle of this field talking about Ted Williams' influence on your family?
It is, Peter. It's a long way from Groton, and it's just an amazing thing that my life's work is writing about sports, and then you end up being a sports writer, which is what Ted hated. And the only reason he put up with me at all was because he loved children who were sick, and Kay went through a bout with leukemia, and Ted just looked after her and talked to her, and therefore I was okay. Even though he could say writer and make it sound like a four-letter word, I was okay because I had the great daughter.
Kate, just talk a little bit about the role that Ted played in your life.
Well, when I was 8 and I was diagnosed, I was in the hospital and I was sick and receiving all my treatment. And one day the phone rang in my hospital room and I picked it up and answered it. And it was just this loud voice telling me that I was going to be okay and, you know, that the doctors were going to take care of me and that back in the day he and Dr. Sidney Farber had, you know, said one day we're going to beat this thing. And I just passed the phone to my dad and said, Daddy, there's a loud man on the phone telling me I'm going to be all right. And he told me later on Ted Williams and what a prominent figure he was and how important he was.
Dan, how reassuring was it to you and your family to have Ted there with you?
Well, I think there's a lot of families who go through this kind of thing, and just to have that kind of a booming voice and that reassurance from a man who was a god to us when we were children, to have him tell you that your daughter's going to be okay and that he knew Dr. Farber personally, it was very reassuring for a parent.
Kay, we've been talking a lot about Ted Williams as a hero. Is he a hero to you?
He has to be for anyone who's associated with the Jimmy Fund because he just did so much, and he would give anything for a sick kid, and he just wouldn't stop until all the sick kids were happy.
And there was, whenever Ted talked to Kate on the phone, he always had one question.
What was it?
Well, one time he called me up. He was in Florida with my dad. He said, well, let's call your little girl up. And he said, oh, my dad tells you you're doing well. How you feeling? He says, you're a softball player. Can you hit? And that was just Ted.
Mike, Ted used to say, I don't want any publicity about this. It's not about Ted Williams. It's about the kids. Could you just talk about what he has meant to the Jimmy Fund and children all around the world?
Well, Peter, you know, Ted Williams was a great ball player, great for our country, defending it. But I have to tell you, maybe a little selfishly, I think maybe his greatest accomplishment is what he did for just those kids. He took this on as his charity when Dr. Farber was one of the very first doctors who was taking on childhood cancer with the idea of defeating it. And Ted believed in Dr. Farber, and he went out and spoke to different groups. I mean, I have a picture of him standing on top of a drive-in movie theater before the show starts making a Jimmy Fund appeal. Now, can you picture Ted up there doing that? And he would visit the kids. He never wanted any publicity for it. And I have to tell you, if it wasn't for Ted Williams, I'm convinced that the Jimmy Fund would not be what it is today. And he has made such an impact, maybe more impact, on fighting a disease than any other professional athlete in the history of this country. That's how big that is.
One final question. Did he make you read The Science of Hitting?
Actually, my brother read it on the plane, and I had to keep looking over his shoulder to make sure I'd know the answers if he ever asked me.
That's great. Kate, Dan, Mike, thank you very much. We've heard a lot tonight about all the different ways that Ted Williams touched people's lives. At the Kennedy Museum, there's a 1961 baseball register that John F. Kennedy kept in the drawer of his desk in the White House while he was President of the United States, because on the inside cover, it had a picture of Ted Williams, and he felt that somehow that was an inspiration to him. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard our words. We've all shared some sentiments. Now we conclude with music and moments that we hope will help you remember where and why and when we all fell in love with baseball, and why it means so much to come together this evening to say thank you and to celebrate the life of a genuine American hero, Ted Williams, now and forever.
I'll never forget it. The last day of the season at Fenway Park in 1960, I got up in the morning at my home at Wellesley Hills, went out to get the morning paper, looked around. It was a gray, cold day, miserable. I went back in. My wife had my breakfast, and I didn't say much. And she said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "I'm sad." I said, "This is Ted's last home game at Fenway Park, and he's given me so many thrills, broadcasting thrills, been the best athlete I ever interviewed, plus he's been a great loyal friend to me over the years." Well, she says, "Eat your breakfast and go to the ball game." So I drove into the ballpark, parked the car, went into the Red Sox clubhouse, and just as I got in there, Johnny Orlando, the clubhouse boy, said, "Gowdy, Gowdy, come here." He took me over in the corner and said, "This is the kid's last game ever." I said, "What do you mean? We have a series in New York this weekend." He says, "Mr. Yockey and Mr. Cronin have told him to take the last 2 games off and go fishing. So this is his last game. But he says, you got to promise me you'll never mention it to anybody." I said, "I promise you, John." And so let's go back now to September 28th, 1960 at Fenway Park. There were 300,000 people at that game. At least everybody told me they were there over the years. Actually, the paid attendance was 10,454. We had some pregame ceremonies, very simple when you look back, too simple. Williams was given a check for $1,000 for the Jimmy Fund, and he passed it on to the Jimmy Fund. I got up and made a 3 or 4 minute tribute to him, never once mentioned his averages, his batting exploits, but stressed his pride, the burning pride he had. There's Joe Cronin, who once told Ted he made 2 mistakes. One, he didn't sign with the Yankees, and secondly, he couldn't run fast enough. He probably would have hit 400 a couple other times. Here's Ted now, warming up, and we're getting ready for the ceremonies. The Baltimore Orioles are the opposition. Here I am coming out now to MC the ceremonies. Here comes Ted. He needed a jacket on a day like that. And they present him the Paul Revere Bowl, Mayor John Hines. I made my little speech in tribute to Ted. He grabbed me, wanted a copy of it. I told him I had lived it, and he gave me hell. And now Ted's going to step up. He first of all thanked the Knights of the Keyboard in sarcasm. That's the press. But he did thank the fans of Boston for sticking with him all the years, and how much he loved them, and how thrilled he was to have a career with the Boston Red Sox and play for the greatest owner in the history of the game. Now Steve Barber's on the mound. Williams is on deck for his first time at bat. Fans don't know this is his last game ever. I kept it a secret for a while. Here comes Ted up. Ball 1 to Williams. Barber misses again. And Williams is about to receive his 2020 walk. Those 5 years he missed, he would have been #1 all time in walks received. He slid in there on a sacrifice fly by Lou Clinton for the Red Sox first run. Now in the third inning, he's coming up. He's against Jack Fisher. Hits a fly ball to deep center field. The Oriole center fielder backs up, makes the grab, and Williams is out. Now he's up for the third time. And he nearly hit a home run this time. A long drive to right field. You can't see it all the way. It was caught right in front of the Oriole bullpen. Now here comes Ted up for his last time at bat. First pitch is a ball. Now a strike. 1-1 the count. Jack Fisher delivers, and there's a long drive to right field. That ball is going. It is gone. It's a home run for Ted Williams in his last time at bat in the major leagues. What a way to go out. The fans stood on their feet, applauding for 4 or 5 minutes, begging him to come back out. And John Updike wrote the classic line, "Gods don't answer letters." And that was it for Ted. He went fishing, and that's the last time we saw him in a Red Sox uniform. I want to say there's never been a more loyal guy to his friends. A very misunderstood man, a proud man, a great man. And I'm just glad that I got to be a friend with Ted Williams. And I told him one time, we were having dinner, I says, "Ted, I want to thank you." He says, "Thank me for what?" He says, "For making me a better broadcaster." "What do you mean?" He said, "I don't know anything about broadcasting." I said, "No, look, I watch you prepare, practice, study constantly." And I said to myself, why can't I do that? Why can't I prepare more? So I started to keep better records, to work at it more. And it was Williams' drive that he passed on to me that really helped me in my career. I owe him a lot. We all owe him a lot. And God bless you, Ted.
Please join in.
God bless America,
Land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, away with Bob. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, away with Bob. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, away with Bob. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Yes, I was about his age, had never seen a field so green, greatest sight I'd ever seen. Daddy taught me how to score, who could ever ask for more? And that's when I fell in love. That's when I fell in love with baseball. For him it's been 50 years, the memories, they still are clear. His daddy said there's number 9, the greatest hitter of all time. A steel town boy, you know the one, Mazeroski's home.
Orsillo back high atop Fenway Park. Well, somewhere tonight, Ted is smiling down on Fenway Park. The greatest living hitter may be gone, but he will never be forgotten. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for this historic event from Fenway Park. Good night, everybody.
Part in Major League Baseball history. Vote for your most memorable moment at every Major League ballpark or on MLB.com. You decide, because after all, these moments belong to you. And we've had quite a few moments here in this one. 8-8 as we go to the ninth. Red Sox fans have had their fun after the Yankees dominated the first 7 innings of this game. And now it's Steve Karsay. Takes over for Stanton, who went 2/3 of an inning, allowed 1 hit. Mendoza's off the hook. He was on it for the loss if the Yankees didn't rally. Karsay throws hard, but he misses with ball 1 to Sanchez, with Garciaparra and Ramirez to follow. Sanchez started that 5-run rally with a base hit in the 8th. 1 out. That'll bring in Garciaparra. The Yankees in the bottom of this ninth will have Giambi, Williams, and Ventura. If the Red Sox have the lead, it'll be Urbina on the mound. If it stays tied, the Boston Red Sox still have Chris Haney, who they've gotten some mileage out of, loosening in their bullpen. .95 miles an hour, and strike 1 off the bat of Garciaparra, who's 1 for 4 with a double and a run scored. The statistics for Karsay since the middle part of June are ugly, and there's another hit against Karsay. It gets down, and Garciaparra will have at least 2. He'll hold there as White gets it back in, a 1-out double. Tim, through June 19th, Karsay was in 36 games, had an ERA of 1.99, and opponents hit .212 against him. Since, in 14 games, his ERA is 10.45, and opponents are hitting .420 against him.
Oh my gosh, startling numbers.
And he gives up a double here, and the Yankees are going to walk Manny Ramirez and pitch to Ricky Henderson, or a pinch hitter off the bench for Boston. Henderson. First intentional walk of the day. By the way, if the Yankees get Henderson and fail to turn a double play, Hillenbrand, who's hitting over .400 against the Yankees coming into this game this season, will get another at bat.
If the Yankees' problems with the bullpen is more than an aberration, in my view, as Mel Stottlemyre is now out to talk to Karsay, in my view, a short or a long reliever may be the most difficult players, pitchers of course, to obtain before the trade deadline. They're hard to come by. They're hard to develop in your own system.
And Brian Cashman and Joe Torre have been asked over the past week, now that you've got Weaver, now that you've got Raul Mondesi, are you content as we approach the trading deadline regarding that bullpen? And their answer was yes, we are content. Who else would you rather have than guys like Karsay, Stanton, Mendoza setting up Rivera? Well, that quartet has had a rough month.
It's a hard thing to do, to determine
whether these guys are the people that you want to take you down the stretch.
Ricky Henderson, of course, a former Yankee, now playing with the Red Sox, has a chance to put Boston back on top. Runners at first and second, one out. Henderson's first at bat. Henderson's in the lineup because he pinch ran for Veritek after the 2-run single, which made it a 1-run Yankee lead back in the 8th. By the way, the word on Mariano Rivera is a strained shoulder. That's the early word, after he left in that 5-run 8th inning because of injury. Already on the DL this season because of a groin strain.
Sometimes strained groins lead to strained shoulders or elbows.
Again, Rivera did not have long to loosen before he came out, with 2 on and nobody out in the top of the 8th. Two players facing each other that were once traded for one another. Carsey traded from Toronto to Oakland for Ricky Henderson back in '93. A high strike, and it's 1-1. That was a trading deadline deal. It sent the veteran Henderson to Tony La Russa in the Oakland Athletics. Nobody has left this ballpark. An 8-8 game, top of the 9th, 2 on, 1 out, 1-1 pitch. Carsey and the Yankees want to know where that missed, and it's 2-1.
Nobody can accordion a strike zone like Ricky Henderson. Up and down the squat right here. And Carsey and Torrey and the Yankees are thinking, where was that pitch? Ricky Henderson works the home plate umpire. He is a very intimidating presence.
A member of the 3,000 hit club, Ricky Henderson, trying to come up with a big one for the Red Sox. Two and two, and now Henderson wants to know why that's a strike.
Yeah, Ricky turned and looked at home plate umpire Marvin Hudson. Of the 25,000 pitches that have been called strikes on Ricky Henderson, he thinks 2 of them were strikes. Maybe. Maybe.
2 on, 1 out, 2 balls, 2 strikes. The opposite way for Giambi. The race to the bag, and Carsey is there before Henderson, 2 out. Now, with first base open, if they wish, the Yankees can walk Hillenbrand, the All-Star, and deal with Mirabelli.
That's pretty clear, and Posada issues the 4 fingers universal sign to put him on.
Well, they've seen enough of Shea Hillenbrand this year. Game-ending, game-winning home run against Mariano Rivera in mid-April. As we said, hitting over 400 against Yankee pitching this season. So that's an easy decision. But it forces Carsey into the strike zone. And the Red Sox have no option but to send Mirabelli to the plate because they've already used Veritek. Mirabelli's their only other catcher on the roster. Lou Merloni would probably give it a shot, but they'll send Mirabelli to the plate.
I would imagine, we didn't check with Grady Little, but I would imagine Lou Merloni would be the emergency catcher.